If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow.
My name is Jack Montgomery, and I'm going to tell you about the night I met something that shouldn't exist, something that brought back all the horrors I thought I'd left behind in Korea. It was a January evening in Yellowstone, 1957. I'd been working as a park ranger for almost 3 years by then. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and blue over Old Faithful Basin. Steam from the geysers was freezing in the air, creating a fog that looked like tiny ice crystals dancing around me. Beautiful, but something felt wrong. I'd been doing this job long enough to trust my gut, and right now, my gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right. It started with the wolf tracks I found in the fresh snow. They were normal at first, just regular wolf prints leading through the trees, but then they just stopped. In their place were deer tracks, which made no sense at all. Deer tracks running backward, like the animal had been walking in reverse. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was seeing things. That's when I noticed how cold it was getting. Not the usual winter cold. This was different. The temperature dropped so fast I could feel it happening. Within minutes, it must have dropped 40 degrees. When I breathed out, my breath turned to ice before it even hit the ground. I'd never seen anything like it. Then the ravens started falling, just dropping from the sky, frozen solid like they'd been in a freezer for days. They hit the ground with hollow thuds, their wings still spread as if they were flying. I reached for my Winchester rifle, tucked safely inside my jacket, but even that wasn't safe from whatever was happening. The metal frosted over like it had been left out in a blizzard. I tried using my radio to call for backup. Instead of the usual static or voice of another ranger, I heard God. Even now it's hard to talk about. I heard screaming. Not just any. Screaming. I recognized those voices. They were the voices of my squad mates from Korea, the ones who didn't make it back. Their final screams as the cold took them at Chosan Reservoir. The snow. The snow started doing impossible things. It began falling upward, defying gravity like someone had flipped the world upside down. The moon turned blood red, casting an eerie light that made everything look like it was covered in a thin layer of blood. I checked my thermometer, but it didn't last long. The mercury froze at -60, and the glass shattered, leaving little silver beads frozen in the snow. The trees around me started making sounds like gunfire. Their sap was freezing so fast that the trunks were exploding. Each crack sounded like artillery shells, sending me right back to the war. Max, my patrol dog who'd never let me down before, stopped dead in his tracks. He was a tough German shepherd, trained to handle anything, but now he was whimpering like a puppy. I watched, in horror as frost started forming in his eyes, and he backed away, refusing to go any further. If Max wouldn't go on, I knew whatever lay ahead was worse than anything we'd faced before. Standing there in the unnatural cold, with my dog trembling beside me and the world going crazy around us, I realized this wasn't just another patrol. This was the beginning of something terrible, something that would force me to face not just the monsters lurking in Yellowstone's wilderness, but the ones I'd carried home from Korea in my own mind. Little did I know, the true horror was just beginning. I should probably tell you more about myself, about why I ended up here in Yellowstone. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I take out the dog tags I carry in my pocket. They belong to Corporal Mike Jenkins, my best friend in Korea. He didn't make it back from Chosin Reservoir. None of them did, except me. Every night before my patrol, I'd take a sip from my dad's old World War I flask. Just enough whiskey to keep the bad dreams away. Dad gave me that flask before he died, told me it helped him forget the things he saw in France. Now I use it to forget Korea, to forget the cold that killed my friends. Sarah, my wife, she left 3 months ago. I don't blame her. Living with someone like me isn't easy. "Your eyes look dead," she said one night after I woke up screaming. "Again. It's like you're still there, frozen in that place." She was right. Part of me never left that frozen hell. The cold weather makes the scars on my face ache. They're like a map of that terrible winter, showing exactly where the frost tried to take me. There's other scars too under my ranger uniform, places where shrapnel found its home. They hurt worse when the temperature drops, like they're trying to remind me of everything I've been through. I keep a loaded .45 under my pillow every night. Sarah hated that too. But I can't sleep without knowing it's there. After what happened in Korea, being trapped in the cold without a way to fight back, I promised myself never again. This ranger job, it was supposed to be my fresh start. Out here in the wild, I don't have to deal with crowds or small spaces. Those things, they take me right back to being trapped in those frozen mountains, surrounded by enemies we couldn't even see. The park is big enough that I can breathe, can pretend I'm normal, but some days are harder than others. When the temperature drops suddenly, my hands start shaking so bad I can barely hold my rifle. I remember digging graves in frozen ground, trying to give my friends some kind of proper burial, when the ground was hard as concrete. In my wallet, there's an old photo of my squad before we shipped out. 12 young faces, smiling at the camera, like we knew what we were getting into. Now I've drawn X's over 11 of those faces. I'm the only one left, and some days I wonder why. Just last week, Bob, the park superintendent, called me into his office. He'd found out about the whiskey, about how I sometimes drink during my night patrols. He should have fired me right there. Instead, he looked at me with sad eyes and said, "Jack, I'm giving you one last chance. Don't make me regret it." I promised him I'd do better. I meant it too. But standing here now, with the world turning strange and cold around me, I wish I had something stronger than whiskey in my flask. Because the cold that's settling over Yellowstone, it feels just like Chosin. And this time, I don't have a squad to watch my back. The wind's picking up now, and it carries sounds that shouldn't be there. Whispers and cries that remind me too much of that last night in Korea. I should turn back, radio for help, do the sensible thing. But I've never been good at sensible. And something tells me that whatever's out there in the dark, it's been waiting for someone like me. Someone who's already seen the worst that winter can do. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. In a clearing ahead, 7 deer were frozen solid, perfectly, preserved like ice sculptures. They were caught mid-jump, their antlers all tangled together in a circle. It looked like they'd been playing some kind of game when the cold caught them. But that's impossible. Deer don't play games, and they certainly don't freeze that fast. I've worked in Yellowstone long enough to know its patterns, its moods. But what I saw next broke every rule of nature I knew. The thermal pools, you know, those hot springs that never freeze, even in the coldest winter, they were frozen solid. Looking down through the ice was like peering through glass. Fish were trapped inside, frozen in place like they were swimming in crystal. I decided to head back to my patrol cabin. But when I got there, things only got weirder. The windows were frosted over, which wouldn't be strange, except the frost was on the inside. I had left a fire burning in the fireplace, and it was still going strong. How could there be frost inside a warm cabin? My compass wasn't working right either. Instead of pointing north like it should, the needle pointed straight down at the ground. And my watch? The hands were moving backward, like time itself was running the wrong way. That's when I found it, a human skull trapped in clear ice. The jaw was open wide, like whoever it belonged to had died screaming. I've seen death before, plenty of times, but this was different. My radio started acting up again. But now, instead of just static, I could hear clear voices coming through. They were playing old radio broadcasts, not just any broadcasts, but the actual distress calls my unit made back in 1950. I heard my own voice, younger and terrified, calling for help that never came. Looking down at my feet, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Whatever was making those tracks in the snow ahead of me was huge, at least 12 feet tall, and its feet, they bent backward, like everything about it was wrong. Wrong in a way that hurt your brain to think about. The trees around me seemed to move, even though there wasn't any wind. Their branches reached toward me like bony fingers trying to grab anything that passed by. Behind me, my own footprints were disappearing. In their place were deep claw marks, like something was following me, erasing my trail. I tried using my flashlight to see better in the growing darkness. But the beam of light did something impossible. It bent at a right angle, like it was turning a corner in midair. And what it showed me in those bent beams, I wish I could unsee it. The cold was getting worse. Every breath felt like swallowing ice. My fingers were going numb, just like they did in Korea. But this wasn't normal cold. This was something else, something hungry. Max, my dog, had started making a sound I'd never heard before. Not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. He was staring into the darkness ahead of us, his ears flat against his head. And in the distance, getting closer, I could hear something moving, something big. The moon was full above us now, casting strange shadows through the steam and ice crystals in the air. And in those shadows, I saw shapes that shouldn't exist, shapes that reminded me of the thing that made those backward footprints. I knew I should run. Every instinct was screaming at me to get out of there. But running hadn't saved my friends in Korea, and something told me it wouldn't save me now. Whatever was out there in the dark, whatever was making the world turn strange and cold, it wanted me to see it. And deep down, past the fear and the memories and the pain, I wanted to see it too. Because maybe, just maybe, facing this thing would help me understand what happened all those years ago in the frozen mountains of Korea. Or maybe it would just add one more nightmare to my collection. Either way, I was about to find out. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow against the moon, maybe a trick of light in the frozen mist. But then it moved. It was tall, taller than any living thing I'd ever seen. Its head nearly touched the low-hanging clouds, and on that head were antlers that looked like dead tree branches reaching for the sky. The thing was skinny, like someone who hadn't eaten in months. I could see its ribs pushing against skin that looked almost see-through in the moonlight, but it wasn't weak. No, it moved like a predator, like something that had been hunting since the beginning of time. When it breathed, the air around it turned to ice. It created these tunnels of frozen air that shattered like glass when anything touched them. I raised my rifle and fired, but the bullets, they just passed right through it. Where each bullet flew, it left behind a perfect little ice sculpture of its path, like frozen lightning in the air. Then it spoke. God help me, it spoke with voices I knew. It used the voices of my dead Marine buddies, saying the exact same things they'd said before they froze to death in Korea. "Jack, I can't feel my legs," it said in Tommy Wilson's voice. "Jack, don't let me freeze," it said, using Billy Martinez's last words. Wherever its feet touched the ground, the snow turned into something colder than ice. It looked like liquid metal, but it was so cold, it froze everything it touched instantly. A rabbit hopped too close to one of these pools and turned into an ice statue before it could even try to run away. The creature screamed then, and the sound, it was like every winter storm I'd ever heard, rolled into one horrible cry. Miles away, snow started sliding down mountain slopes. I could hear glaciers cracking like thunder. I tried to look directly at its face, but its eyes, they were like looking into living blizzards. Just a quick glance made my whole body feel like it was freezing from the inside out. I'd felt cold before, but this was different. This was the kind of cold that could freeze your soul. Then it did something that still gives me nightmares. It reached out towards some frozen animals nearby, deer and wolves that had gotten too close, and somehow made them move. Their frozen bodies jerked around like puppets on strings, ice cracking as they moved in ways that dead things shouldn't move. The trees around us started changing too. The creature touched them, and they turned into spears made of ice that shot up from the ground like nature's spear gun. One nearly got me, missed my head by inches and took my hat clean off. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was when it showed me visions of my old squad. It made me watch them die again, over and over, exactly the way it happened in Korea. Only this time, I could see what really killed them. It wasn't just the cold. It was this thing, this monster, that had followed us through those mountains. Max, my brave dog who'd faced down bears and wolves without flinching, was pressed against my legs, shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. The cold was getting worse. I could feel ice forming on my eyelashes, making it hard to blink. I knew I had to do something. Running wasn't an option. You can't outrun something that big, something that can freeze the air itself. Fighting seemed impossible too. What good are bullets against something that can turn solid ground into liquid ice? But then I remembered something. Something about Old Faithful, about heat and steam and pressure building up underground. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fight this thing. Not with bullets or bravery, but with the very thing it seemed to. Hate most, heat. I started backing away slowly, heading toward Old Faithful's basin. The creature followed, just like I hoped it would. Every step it took froze more of the world around us, but I noticed something. When it got near the steam vents, its movements got slower. The ice it created didn't spread as far. That's when I knew what I had to do. But first I had to get it closer to the geyser. And to do that, I had to use something it couldn't resist. Bait that would draw it right where I wanted it. With shaking hands, I reached into my pocket and pulled out Mike Jenkins' dog tags, the ones I'd carried since Korea, the ones that somehow stayed warm even in this impossible cold. "You want these?" I shouted at the creature. "Come and get them." The creature took the bait. It followed me as I led it through the maze of steaming vents and bubbling mud pots around Old Faithful. Each step was dangerous. One wrong move, and I'd fall into boiling water or scalding steam. But I knew these paths like the back of my hand. It was my home ground. I had noticed something important. Whenever the creature passed near the hot steam vents, it seemed to weaken. Its ice powers didn't work as well, and its skin started letting off steam like dry ice in hot water. That's when I knew I had a chance. I reached into my pack and pulled out the dynamite we keep for emergency avalanche. Control. My hands were shaking so bad from the cold that I could barely hold the matches, but somehow I got them lit. The creature was getting closer, its massive form blocking out the moon above me. "This is for my squad," I whispered, and threw the dynamite. The explosion shook the ground and started a chain reaction. Tons of snow came crashing down from the nearby slopes. For a moment, I thought I had won. The avalanche buried the creature completely under a mountain of snow. But I was wrong. It burst out of the snow like it was nothing more than paper. Before I could move, it shot an ice spear right through my shoulder. The pain was worse than anything I'd felt before, like being stabbed with a red-hot poker made of ice. I fell to my knees, leaving a trail of blood that froze the instant it hit the snow. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I started crawling toward the main geyser basin, where I knew Old Faithful was due to erupt any minute. The creature followed, probably thinking I was just trying to escape. With my good arm, I reached for the emergency flares in my belt. These weren't ordinary flares. They were powerful enough to be seen for miles. I knew that underneath the frozen ground were pockets of natural gas, just waiting for a spark. The creature was right behind me now. I could feel its cold breath on my neck, hear the voices of my dead friends calling out to me from its mouth. I waited until the last possible second, then lit all the flares at once and threw them down into a crack in the earth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground started to shake. The heat from the flares had ignited the gas pockets, and the pressure was building up fast. The frozen crust began to crack and break apart. The creature and I both fell into the boiling mud when the ground gave way. I felt the heat all around me, heard its inhuman shriek as the steam and hot mud started to melt its frozen form. Its antlers melted first, dripping like candle wax, then the rest of it began to dissolve. I thought that was it for me, too. I was sure I was going to die in that boiling pit. But somehow, maybe because I was human, maybe because I was meant to survive again, I managed to grab onto a ledge and pull myself out. The last thing I saw before I passed out was Old Faithful, erupting with more force than I'd ever seen, shooting steam and boiling water hundreds of feet into the air. The creature's final scream was lost in the roar of the geyser. When the other rangers found me the next morning, there wasn't much evidence of what had happened. The ground had refrozen, covering everything in new snow. All they found were my dog tags, melted and fused into a piece of black glass where the geyser had erupted. They didn't believe my story, of course. Said I must have gotten lost in the cold, maybe hit my head. The wound in my shoulder. They said I must have fallen on a sharp piece of ice. Even Bob, the superintendent, suggested I take some time off, maybe see a doctor about my experiences. But I know what I saw that night. And sometimes, on cold winter evenings when the moon is full, I can still hear those voices in the wind. I keep the melted dog tags on my desk as a reminder that not all monsters are in our heads, and not all wars are fought by armies. Now, whenever people ask me why I don't work night shifts anymore, I just tell them I've had my fill of full moons. And if they notice how I keep my back to the wall and my eyes on the windows whenever it snows, well, they're polite enough not to mention it, because some things, once you've seen them, you can never unsee. And some kinds of cold, they never really leave you. My name is Vincent Torres, and I'm about to tell you something that happened to me in Redwood National Park back in 1969. I still don't know if anyone will believe me, but I need to get this story out. Maybe then the nightmares will stop. It all started on a foggy morning in late September. The weather was getting cooler, and the fog was rolling in thick between the giant redwood trees, making everything look ghostly and strange. You know how sometimes fog can play tricks on your eyes? Well, this fog was different. It moved like the phantom soldiers I used to see back in Vietnam, creeping through the jungle. I was doing my usual morning patrol as a park ranger. The job was supposed to help me forget about the war, but lately, everything kept reminding me of it. There was this hippie commune nearby, and their drums would echo through the forest every morning. But that day, something was off about the rhythm. It hit me like a punch to the gut. It sounded exactly like the military cadence we used to march to in Vietnam. I tried telling myself it was all in my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As I walked deeper into the forest, things got stranger. The hippies had painted some of the trees with their usual peace signs and psychedelic patterns, but in the corner of my eye, they looked different. Every time I turned my head quickly, the bright colors seemed to shift into the same camouflage, patterns we used in the war. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things again. My doctor warned me about flashbacks, but this felt real. Then the smell hit me. Mixed in with the sweet marijuana smoke from the commune was something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The sharp, unmistakable smell of cordite, like right after firing a gun. That smell shouldn't have been there, not 8,000 miles away from Vietnam, not in a peaceful national park in California. I noticed something else too. All those peace symbols the hippies had carved into the trees, they were bleeding. Not regular tree sap, but this red stuff that looked exactly like the Burns napalm left behind. I'd seen enough of those burns in the war to recognize them anywhere. Near the commune's usual gathering spot, I found one of their "Make Love Not War" banners torn to shreds. But someone, or something, had taken those pieces and woven them into what looked like a military ghillie suit, the kind snipers use for hiding. My hands started shaking as I examined it. This wasn't just random damage. Someone knew what they were doing. The commune always had these little transistor radios playing protest songs, but when I passed by them that morning, the music kept breaking up, turning into static that sounded exactly like Vietnamese radio chatter. I could swear I heard the same code words we used during the war coming through those speakers. Walking through the oldest part of the grove, where the really big redwoods grow, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were these round depressions in the ground, perfectly shaped like mortar strike craters. I'd seen hundreds of them in Vietnam, and these looked exactly the same, right down to the way the dirt was packed around the edges. Some of the flower children from the commune found me later that morning. They were scared, talking about seeing some kind of invisible giant in the woods. They said it smelled like jungle rot, another smell I knew too well from my time overseas. I told them they were probably just spooked by shadows, but I didn't believe my own words. The whole time I was walking, my combat boots kept sinking into the soil in a way that felt wrong for California forest ground. Each step felt like walking through rice paddy mud, the same stuff that used to suck at our feet in Vietnam. The sensation was so real that I had to stop several times to check my boots, expecting to find that thick, clay-like mud we dealt with overseas. Something was very wrong in these woods, and deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. I should have run right then, should have turned in my badge and gotten as far away from those redwoods as possible. But I was a soldier before I was a ranger, and soldiers don't run from fights, even when they should. I guess I should tell you more about myself, about why I ended up as a park ranger in the first place. It's not the kind of job I ever thought I'd have, but after what happened in Vietnam, it seemed like the only place I could go. I got a Purple Heart in the war. Not for anything brave, just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It happened during a routine patrol. We thought we were helping some civilians, but in the confusion and bad light, things went terribly wrong. 3 innocent people died that day because of a mistake I made. Their faces still visit me in my dreams. After that, the military doctor said I wasn't fit for combat anymore. They called it combat stress and gave me an honorable discharge. But how do you just turn off everything you've seen? Everything you've done? That's when someone suggested I try working in the parks. They said the quiet would help, the forests would heal me. At first, it seemed like a good idea. The redwoods reminded me of the triple canopy jungle in Vietnam. But in a peaceful way, I thought, except I couldn't shake my old habits. Every night I'd climb up into the trees to sleep. Sounds crazy, right? But after the Tet Offensive, I learned that the ground wasn't safe. Up in the trees you could see them coming. I know I'm not supposed to, but I still carry my M1 1911 pistol. I load it with tracer rounds, the kind that light up when you fire them. I tell anyone who asks that they're for illumination, but really they help me make sure what I'm seeing is real. Sometimes, in the shadows between the trees, I see them, Viet Cong soldiers slipping through the darkness. Deep down, I know they're not really there, but I check anyway, every single time. Sarah, my girlfriend, tried to understand. She really did. She'd listen to my stories, hold me when the nightmares came, but things got worse instead of better. I started giving the redwoods names, the names of my dead squad mates. I'd talk to them during my night patrols, telling them to keep watch while I checked the perimeter. The helicopter tours were the worst. Every time one flew overhead, I'd dive for cover without even thinking. The tourists would scream, thinking something was wrong. Something was wrong, but not what they thought. In my mind, those weren't tour helicopters. They were Hueys coming in hot, carrying more young men to die in the jungle. I started finding Vietnamese soil in my uniform pockets. Sarah said I was probably just collecting dirt from the park, but it wasn't the same. This soil was different, the exact same color and texture as the earth from Quang Tri province. I couldn't explain how it got there, and that scared me more than anything. My old radio stayed tuned to the armed forces frequency, even though it went silent years ago. Sometimes late at night, I swear I could hear voices coming through, coordinates being called out, requests for medical evacuation, the same messages I used to hear in the war. The final straw for Sarah came when she found me digging around our cabin. I was building punji traps, hidden pits with sharpened stakes at the bottom. We used them in Vietnam for protection. She said I needed help, that I was losing touch with reality. Maybe she was right, but after what I've seen in these woods lately, I'm not so sure anymore. The thing is, all of this, the sleeping in trees, the gun, the radio, the traps, it all seemed crazy until the strange things started happening in the park. Now I'm wondering if maybe I wasn't paranoid after all. Maybe I was just preparing. Because whatever's out there in those redwoods, whatever's stalking through the fog, it knows things. Things about the war, things about me, and it's getting closer every day. The first really weird thing I noticed was how the redwood trees started bending. Not like normal trees swaying in the wind. These giant trees were bending at angles that just weren't possible. It was like walking through a tunnel made of twisted trees. And at the end of each tunnel, I could swear I saw movement. Then came the footprints. I've been tracking animals in these woods for years now, but I'd never seen anything like these. They would just appear in the mud, right in front of my eyes, like something invisible was making them. And these weren't bear tracks or mountain lion prints. They looked like boot prints, size 22. That's bigger than any human foot I've ever seen. One morning I found something that made my stomach turn. Someone, or something, had stripped the bark off several trees in a spiral pattern. It wasn't random damage from animals or weather. No, these marks matched exactly the torture techniques we'd seen used on trees in Vietnam. The kind meant to send a message. The hippie commune started reporting that their food was disappearing, not being stolen at night, vanishing right in front of them while they were eating. They said they could see their sandwiches and fruit floating through the air, then just gone. At first I thought they were just high on something, but then I saw it happen myself. A whole pot of stew lifting off their campfire and disappearing into thin air. I had set up trip flares around my patrol area, old habit from the war. One night they all went off at once. But instead of just burning randomly, the smoke spelled out words in the air. "They're in the trees." I ran back to my cabin and didn't sleep that night. Things got worse. We found some of the hippies tied up in the trees one morning. Someone had used their own peace sign necklaces to bind them to the branches. They were scared but unhurt. They kept saying they never saw who did it. Just felt something cold brush past them before they were grabbed. The light in the forest started playing tricks on us. Or at least we thought it was tricks. Certain spots between the trees seemed to bend the sunlight around them, creating perfect hiding spots. You could walk right past these areas and not see anything there, even if something was standing right in front of you. One of the commune kids had been taking Polaroid pictures of the forest for some art project. When she developed them, we all saw it. In places where there had been nothing but empty space between trees, the photos showed something massive, something that shouldn't have been there. My old combat knife started acting strange, too. Whenever I held it out, the blade would vibrate, like it was being pulled towards certain parts of the forest. It always pointed to the oldest groves, where the redwoods were so big you couldn't wrap your arms even halfway around them. But the worst thing happened to the commune's dogs. They had these big, friendly mutts that helped guard their camp. One morning, we found all 6 dogs arranged in a perfect military formation, like soldiers standing at attention. Every single one had been killed the same way, their throats crushed by something incredibly strong, something that knew military protocols. The police didn't believe us, of course. They said it was probably just some prankster messing with the hippies, or maybe a bear getting aggressive. But bears don't arrange things in military formations. Bears don't make trees bend like rubber. And bears definitely don't turn invisible. I started keeping a journal of everything that happened, writing down every strange thing I saw. Looking back at those notes now, I can see how it was all building up to something. Whatever was out there in those woods, it wasn't just randomly terrorizing us. It was studying us, learning our routines, testing our defenses, and it seemed especially interested in me. One night, I found my old military photos scattered around my cabin, pictures I kept locked in a metal box under my bed. They were arranged in a timeline, from my first day of basic training right up to that terrible day in the village where everything went wrong. But I hadn't taken those photos out. I hadn't even opened that box in months. The local rangers started avoiding certain parts of the forest. They wouldn't talk about why, but I could see it in their eyes. They'd seen something out there too, something that made them question everything they knew about what was possible in our world. I tried to warn people to stay away from the deep parts of the forest, especially at night. Some listened, most didn't. They thought old Vincent was just losing his mind again, seeing things that weren't there. But I knew what I saw. And I knew that whatever was out there in those redwoods was getting bolder. It was building up to something big. I could feel it in my bones, the same way I used to feel an ambush coming in Vietnam. And just like back then, I knew that when it finally showed itself, people were going to die. I first saw it clearly on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was doing my usual patrol when something moved between the trees ahead of me. At first, I thought it was just another shadow, but then part of it became visible, like someone turning down the dial on an invisible shield. It was huge, at least 9 feet tall, covered in thick fur that somehow shifted into perfect camouflage patterns, just like the ones we used in Vietnam. When the rain hit it, you could see its outline in the water droplets, like watching rain fall on a glass statue. But this was no statue. It was alive, and it was watching me. The creature started communicating in a way that chilled me to my bones. It would knock on the trees in patterns, not random knocks, but perfect Morse code. The first message it sent made my heart stop. Know your enemy. Those were the exact words my sergeant used to drill into our heads during the war. Then it showed me what it could do. Standing right in front of me, it made a fallen log completely disappear, not by covering it up or moving it. The log just vanished, like someone had erased it from the world. The creature could bend light around things, make them invisible, just like it made itself invisible. But that wasn't the worst part. It started making sounds. Horrible, perfect copies of sounds I hadn't heard in years. The whop, whop, whop of Huey helicopters, the crack of AK-47 fire, and the screams. The screams of dying soldiers I'd known. Sounds that had only existed in my nightmares since coming home. Wherever it walked, it left these strange footprints filled with an orange liquid that killed any plant it touched. It reminded me of Agent Orange, the chemical we used to strip leaves from the trees in Vietnam. The smell was the same, that sharp, chemical burn in your nose that you never forget. One morning, I found it had done something impossible. It was projecting my own memories onto the fog between the trees, like some kind of natural movie screen. I saw moments from the war I'd never told anyone about. Secret missions, faces of people long dead, places I'd tried so hard to forget. The thing knew details about operations I'd been part of, missions so secret they weren't even in my military records. It would leave clues about these missions, arranged like evidence at a crime scene. How could it know these things? Nobody knew these things except the men who were there, and most of them were dead. We found some of its hair caught on a tree. It branched and sent it to a lab for testing. The results made no sense. The scientists said it wasn't from any known animal, but it had pieces of human DNA mixed in. When I asked what kind of human DNA, they just shook their heads. They'd never seen anything like it. It started setting traps for me, invisible tripwires that would trigger my worst memories when I hit them. One minute I'd be walking through the redwoods, the next I'd be back in the jungle, watching my friends die all over again. These weren't just flashbacks anymore. They felt more real than my actual memories. The park rangers who were still around started carrying weapons, even though it was against the rules. Not that guns would help. We never knew where the creature was until it wanted us to see it. It could be standing right next to you, and you'd never know until it was too late. The hippies packed up and left after what happened to their dogs. Can't blame them. The ones who stayed in the park kept reporting strange things. Their tents would collapse with no wind. Their fires would go out for no reason. And sometimes they'd wake up to find themselves in different places than where they'd fallen asleep. More and more people started going missing in the park. They'd walk into the woods and just never walk out. Search parties would find their belongings arranged in military formations like some sick joke. But we never found any bodies, never found any signs of struggle. They just vanished. I tried to get help from my old military contacts, but nobody would listen. They said I was having episodes again, that I needed to go back to the hospital. But I knew what I was seeing was real. The creature made sure I knew it was real. One night, it left a present outside my cabin, a collection of dog tags from different wars. Some were from Vietnam, others from Korea, even a few that looked like they were from World War II. They were all real, all belonging to soldiers who had gone missing in action over the years. The message was clear. I wasn't its first soldier, and I wouldn't be its last. I knew then that I couldn't run anymore. This thing, whatever it was, had chosen me for a reason. It had been watching me, studying me, learning about me. And now it was ready to finish whatever game it had been playing. The next morning, I geared up for patrol like I always did. But this time was different. This time I knew I wasn't coming back. The creature was done playing hide-and-seek. It was time for the real hunt to begin. I decided to use everything I'd learned in Vietnam to set up one final fight. I chose a clearing surrounded by the oldest redwoods as my battleground. I knew the creature would come. It always seemed drawn to the ancient trees. I set up the area just like we used to set up kill zones in the war. But this time I added some new tricks. I strung up empty cans between the trees, an old trick to hear something coming. I scattered dead leaves in careful piles that would make noise if stepped on. I even set up some mirrors I'd taken from my cabin, angling them, so I could see around corners of trees. If this thing wanted to play games with light, I'd play right back, but I should have known better. As soon as night fell, I realized the creature was using my own tactics against me. Invisible pits started appearing in the ground, exactly like the punji traps I used to make. It was copying everything I'd learned in the war, but doing it better. I nearly fell into one of these pits. When I shined my flashlight down into it, I saw sharpened stakes at the bottom, arranged perfectly, like it had read the military manual on trap making. Then the real torture began. The creature started projecting memories onto the fog again, but this time it showed me the My Lai massacre. I hadn't even been there, but somehow it knew about it, knew how much that event had haunted every soldier who heard about it. I watched helplessly as the images played out in front of me like a movie I couldn't turn off. It got worse. The thing started using the redwood sap like we used to use napalm, creating walls of fire that herded me exactly where it wanted me to go. The heat was real. I could feel it burning my skin, smell my uniform starting to smoke. I was running out of options and it knew it. I did the only thing I could think of. I started climbing. I picked the tallest redwood I could find and went up as fast as I could. These trees are like nature's ladders, with branches spaced just right if you know how to climb them. But the creature followed me up, moving in ways that nothing that big should be able to move. It went straight up the trunk like a spider, weaving in and out of visibility as it came after me. When I reached the top, where the branches were swaying in the wind, I made a horrible discovery. Hung up there in the highest branches was a collection of military dog tags, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They weren't just from Vietnam either. Some looked ancient, like they went back to the Civil War. Each one had a name, a rank, a story. Each one was someone who had disappeared in these woods. I fired my emergency flare, hoping it might do something. The red light caught the creature just right, and for a moment its invisibility flickered off completely. What I saw in that brief flash of light, I don't have words for it. It wasn't just big, it was ancient. Its fur had patterns that looked like military camouflage from every war ever fought. Its eyes, they had seen everything, every battle, every death, every war. Before I could process what I was seeing, it grabbed me. The strength in its hands was unbelievable. It shoved me inside a hollow part of the redwood and started squeezing. The whole tree began to creak and groan. It was going to crush me inside the trunk, make me become part of the tree, just like it had done to all those other soldiers. I reached for my radio. Not my park radio, but my old military one. The one that hadn't worked in years. But this time, when I pressed the button, I heard the static clear. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. I sent out one last transmission, just like I used to in Vietnam. Charlie's got me surrounded, calling in airstrike on my position. The creature paused when it heard those words. Maybe it recognized them. Maybe it knew what they meant. Maybe it had heard other soldiers say those same words before. I closed my eyes and waited for whatever was going to happen next. The last thing I remember was a sound like thunder rolling through the redwoods. But it wasn't thunder. It was the sound of every tree in the forest creaking at once, like they were all bending toward us. Then everything went dark. They found my dog tags 3 days later, melted right into the bark of that old redwood. The tree was still living, still growing, with the metal becoming more embedded in its trunk every day. But they never found my body, never found any sign of what happened up there in the branches. Some of the other rangers say that on quiet nights, if you stand near that tree, you can hear military radio chatter coming from inside the trunk. Others say they've seen strange shadows moving through the forest, walking in perfect military formation, always at night, always near the oldest trees, but no one goes into those deep groves anymore. They've roped off that whole section of the park, saying it's to protect the old-growth redwoods. But I know the truth. They're not protecting the trees from people. They're protecting people from what lives in the trees. You might be wondering how I'm telling you this story if I disappeared that night. Truth is, I'm not sure myself. I woke up 3 months later in a VA hospital in San Francisco. The doctors said some hikers found me at the edge of the park, wrapped in what looked like shredded military uniforms from different wars. I was dehydrated, confused, and kept talking about a creature in the trees. The official report says I had a severe PTSD episode. They wrote that I wandered the forest for days, got lost, and made up the whole thing in my head. But they can't explain the strange marks all over my body, marks that look like tree bark patterns pressed into my skin. They can't explain why my dog tags are still growing deeper into that redwood tree every year, and they definitely can't explain the photos. See, I had a disposable camera with me that night. When they found me, it was still in my pocket. Most of the pictures were too damaged to make out, but 3 of them survived. The first shows a massive shadow bending a redwood tree like it was made of rubber. The second captured those military dog tags hanging in the branches, hundreds of them catching the flare's light. The third one shows something that shouldn't exist. Something that looks like a mix between a soldier and a creature that's lived in those woods since before humans came along. The Park Service keeps these photos locked away now. They say it's to prevent panic, to keep people from spreading crazy stories about the redwoods. But they also closed off the entire section of the forest where it all happened. They built fences, posted guards, and tell everyone it's a wildlife preservation area. Sarah came to see me in the hospital. She said she believed me now, showed me a journal she'd been keeping of strange things she'd seen while I was missing. Shadows moving against the wind, military equipment from different wars appearing in her backyard, the sound of marching feet. In the forest at night, she moved away from the park right after that visit. Last I heard, she was living somewhere without any big trees. The hippie commune never came back, but every now and then, one of them posts something online about their time in the park, about the invisible giant that hunted them, about the way it mimicked war sounds in a place that should have been all about peace. They don't use their real names when they tell these stories. They're still scared. Me? I left the park service and moved to the desert. No trees here, no shadows to play. Tricks on my eyes. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear tree branches creaking like they did that night. And in my dreams, I'm still up in those redwoods, watching that creature show me every war that ever was, every soldier who ever disappeared into those ancient woods. I got a letter last week. No return address, but the envelope had a small piece of bark inside, bark with military camouflage patterns grown right into it. The note was short, written in perfect Morse code. Soldiers never die, they just fade away into the trees. I burned the letter but kept the bark. It sits on my desk now, a reminder that some wars never end, some enemies never die, and some stories are true even when they can't possibly be real. If you ever visit Redwood National Park, stick to the tourist trails. Don't go into the deep woods where the old trees grow. And if you hear military cadence being drummed on tree trunks, or see shadows moving like soldiers on patrol, turn around and walk away, fast, because that thing is still out there, watching from the trees, still collecting its trophies, still hunting, and it's learning new tricks every day. Some people ask me if I'm afraid to tell this story, afraid that creature might come looking for me again. But I think that's missing the point. It never lost me, just like it never lost any of the others. We're all still there in those woods, our dog tags growing deeper into the trees, our stories becoming part of the forest. The real question isn't whether to be afraid of the creature in the redwoods. The real question is, how many wars has it seen? How many soldiers has it taken? And what is it preparing for? Because every good soldier knows you don't spend that much time gathering intelligence unless you're planning something big. And me, I'm just the latest scout it sent back to spread the word. My name is Theodore Baker, but everyone around here calls me Red. I guess that's what happens when you spend 52 years with hair the color of a Colorado sunset. The younger rangers sometimes joke that I've been here as long as the mountains themselves. They're not entirely wrong. I've spent more than half my life watching over these peaks. I need to write down what happened last summer in Rocky Mountain National Park. Nobody might believe it, but every word is true. I've seen things up in those mountains that still keep me awake at night. Things that make me question everything I thought I knew about nature and the wind itself. It all started on a clear morning in June 1975. I was doing my usual patrol near the timberline, where the trees give up trying to grow and the real mountain takes over. The air was different that day. You spend enough time in these mountains and you get to know how the wind should sound. But this was wrong. The first scream came from nowhere. I've heard plenty of sounds in my years as a ranger. Wolves howling, eagles crying, even the weird sound a mountain lion makes when it's angry. But this was like nothing on earth. It rode the wind from somewhere high above, a sound that shouldn't exist, echoing off the empty sky. I called it in on my radio, but before anyone could respond, I found something that made my stomach turn. A group of ptarmigan birds, these white birds that usually hop around the high slopes, lay scattered on the ground. But they weren't just dead. They were turned inside out, like someone had reached inside and pulled. Their organs were on the outside, but there wasn't a drop of blood anywhere. It was as if the wind itself had done it. Things only got stranger after that. Down at the ranger stations, all our wind socks, you know, those cone-shaped things that show which way the wind's blowing, started pointing inward. All of them, at the same time. I've been working with weather equipment since before some of these young rangers were born, and that's just not possible. The wind can't blow in all directions at once. Then came the clouds. Now, I've seen all sorts of shapes in clouds before, but these were different. They formed faces, clear as day, moving their mouths like they were trying to warn us about something. I watched them with my binoculars, and I swear those faces were looking right back at me. The experienced climbers started reporting problems too. Good equipment just failing out of nowhere, but only when the wind blew in certain patterns. Sarah, Chen, one of our best climbers, said her ropes became brittle like they'd aged 20 years in minutes. But only when that strange wind was blowing, I saw things that made me question my own eyes. Snow cornices, those overhanging edges of snow on the mountaintops, started collapsing upward. Up, not down, like gravity had suddenly reversed itself. The weather vanes on our buildings spun counterclockwise, no matter which way the wind blew. During electrical storms, our radio towers picked up what sounded like children laughing. Not static, not interference, actual laughter. Even the mountain goats knew something was wrong. These animals are fearless, born to dance around on cliff edges that would make most humans dizzy, but they started hiding in caves, refusing to come out onto the ridges they'd lived on for generations. When mountain goats start acting scared of heights, you know something isn't right. The last straw was the barometric pressure readings. These machines measure the weight of the air, and they usually make nice, smooth lines on the paper. But our readings started making patterns that looked exactly like heart monitor readings, the kind you see in hospitals when someone's heart is giving out. I've spent my life learning every mood of these mountains. I know how they breathe, how they change with the seasons. But in all my years, I'd never seen anything like this. Something was wrong with the wind itself. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Looking back now, I should have seen it as a warning. The mountains were trying to tell us something was coming, something that didn't belong here. Something that would test not just my courage, but my very understanding of what's possible in this world. But I was too stubborn, too set in my ways to see it then. Maybe if I had, things would have turned out differently. But then again, maybe. This was always meant to be my last summer in the mountains I called home. I should have listened to Martha, my wife. She's been begging me to retire ever since my small stroke last winter. Red, she said, holding my hand in the hospital, the mountains will still be there without you. But she doesn't understand. These mountains aren't just rocks and trees to me. They're my whole life. Every morning, I wake up before sunrise and try to hide how much my joints hurt. The arthritis makes climbing feel like someone stuck knives in my knees, but I won't let the young rangers see me limping. I've trained too many of them to show. Weakness now. 3 generations of rangers have learned these trails from me, and none of them have matched my record of summit climbs. Though these days, each climb feels like it might be my last. There's something I haven't told anyone, except Doc Wilson. I've started carrying a small oxygen tank in my backpack. The thin air up high gets to me now, makes my chest tight and my breath short. I hide behind trees to take quick puffs when no one's looking. The wheezing is getting harder to hide, especially during rescue operations. My right eye is getting cloudy too. Doc calls it cataracts, says I should get it fixed. But surgery means time away from the mountains, and I can't do that. Not now. Sure, it makes judging distances on the cliffs tricky, but I've walked these paths so many times, I could do it blindfolded. Martha found the retirement papers in my desk last week. The pension would be good, more than enough for us to live comfortably. But there's an old saying among rangers, we die with our boots on. My father was a ranger here too, and I still use his old climbing gear. The worn leather harness and hemp ropes might look ancient to the youngsters with their fancy nylon equipment, but they've never failed me. You're being stubborn, Red, Martha told me last night. The mountains don't care about pride. Maybe she's right, but these trails are like my children. I've watched them change through seasons, protected them from careless tourists, rescued lost hikers from their dangers. How do you retire from being a parent? I've gotten good at hiding the shakes in my hands. Always keep a coffee mug or radio in my grip. That way, nobody notices. The younger rangers still come to me for advice, still trust my judgment. If they knew how hard it was becoming to hold a pen steady enough to write in the logbook. Last month, Doc Wilson, bless him, helped me fudge my physical exam. One more season, he said, not meeting my eyes. That's all I can give you, Red. After that, we both could lose our jobs. I nodded, knowing he was risking his career for an old fool's pride. The thing is, it's not just pride. Something's wrong. In my mountains, something I can't explain. Those strange winds, the unnatural events, they started right when the retirement papers arrived. Maybe it's just coincidence, but after 52 years up here, I've learned there's no such thing as coincidence in the mountains. The young rangers have good hearts and strong backs, but they don't know how to read the mountains like I do. They haven't learned to feel the difference between a normal change in weather and something unnatural. They haven't developed that sixth sense that tells you when the mountain itself is trying to warn you. Last night, I stood on my back porch, looking up at the peaks. The moon was full, casting strange shadows on the snow. For a moment, I thought I saw something moving up there, something big. The wind carried a sound, not quite a scream, not quite a whisper, that made my bad knee throb and my partly clouded eye water. I should have been scared, I suppose. But instead, I felt something different. Purpose. Whatever's happening, up there in my mountains, it's not just about me anymore. It's not about proving I can still do the job or refusing to accept that time catches up with everyone eventually. No, there's something else going on. Something that needs an old ranger who knows every fold and crease of these mountains like the lines on his own face. The retirement papers sit unsigned in my desk drawer. They can wait. First, I need to figure out what's happening to my mountains, because whatever it is, I have a feeling it's been waiting for me. And maybe, just maybe, this is why I'm still here. Things started getting worse one Tuesday morning. I was at my usual spot near Eagle Ridge when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The birds, thousands of them, were flying the wrong way. Now, I'm not talking about being a little off course. These birds were flying straight into a storm instead of away from it. Anyone who's spent time in nature knows that's just not right. I checked my altimeter, the device that tells you how high up you are. The numbers kept changing even though I was standing still. 1 minute it said 10,000 feet, the next 12,000. I tapped it, shook it, but it wasn't broken. Something was messing with it. When Joey, one of our newer rangers, fired a rescue flare during practice, we all watched in disbelief as it curved back down like a boomerang. It wasn't the wind that did it. The air was dead still. The flare moved like something was controlling it. Then I heard it. A voice in the wind, clear as day. Too old to fly, too proud to fall. The words seemed meant just for me. I'm not much for ghost stories, but there was no mistaking what I heard. My hands shook as I reached for my radio, then stopped. Who would believe me? Looking down at my climbing rope, my heart nearly stopped. The fraying pattern matched my heartbeat perfectly, weakening and strengthening in the exact rhythm of my pulse. I've seen ropes wear out before, but never like this. Never in a pattern. The strange events kept piling up. Every weather balloon we sent up popped at exactly 13,000 feet, not a foot higher or lower, always 13,000. We stopped sending them up after the fifth one, couldn't waste any more equipment. During my evening patrol, I found something that made me question everything. Fresh claw marks on the cliff face, deep gouges in solid rock that weren't there that morning. They were huge, bigger than any animal I've ever seen in these mountains, and they were warm to the touch, like whatever made them was burning hot. But what I found next chilled me to the bone. Hidden in a cave high up on the north face was a massive nest, built entirely out of climbing gear. Ropes, harnesses, helmets, carabiners. Equipment from missing hikers going back decades. Some pieces were so old they'd nearly turned to dust. Others looked brand new. I recognized a red harness from a case 3 years ago, a climber we never found. When I got back to the station that evening, Martha gasped when she saw my face. The windburn had formed a strange pattern on my skin, like a map of veins and arteries. Doc Wilson said it looked exactly like a diagram of the human. Art. It didn't hurt, but it wouldn't wash off either. The eagles were the last straw. These proud birds, kings of the sky, suddenly started dropping from the clouds like stones. Their wings would fold up tight against their bodies, and they'd plummet straight down. Just before hitting the ground, they'd spread their wings and fly away, like they were being forced to dive. I sat in my office that night, looking at old photos of the mountains. 52 years of service, and I'd never seen anything like this. The park records didn't show anything similar either, and I'd read them all. Whatever was happening, it was new. Or maybe it was very, very old, and just deciding to show itself. Now, the wind whistled through the cracks in my office window, but it wasn't a normal whistle. It sounded like words again, too quiet to make out, but definitely there. I pulled out my father's old journal, flipping through the yellowed pages. He'd been a ranger here for 30 years before me, and if anyone had seen something like this before, it would have been him. There, on a page dated 1943, I found something. A single line, written in shaky handwriting, unlike his usual neat script. The wind has teeth today. Nothing else, just those 5 words, but they sent a shiver down my spine. I closed the journal and looked out my window at the darkening peaks. The clouds were gathering again, forming those strange faces. But this time they weren't just warning, they were watching, waiting. Something was coming, something that knew me, knew my fears and weaknesses. And somehow I knew that all these strange events were just the opening act. The real show was about to begin, whether I was ready or not. I first saw it during a storm last Thursday. I was checking the upper trails when the sky turned black faster than any natural storm I'd ever seen. That's when it appeared. And even now, my hand shakes as I write about it. The creature looked like something from a nightmare. It had the body shape of a person, but that's where any similarity to anything normal ended. Its wings were like a bat's, but huge. They kept changing size with the wind. When the gusts picked up, the wings grew bigger, spreading out like dark clouds. Its head was like a horse's skull, bleached white against the dark sky, and its legs reminded me of a mountain goat's, but wrong, all twisted and bent backward. The worst part was its tail. It had spikes all along it, like a row of icicles made of metal. As it moved through the air, the tail left trails of frost in the sky that spelled out words I tried hard not to read. The air around it felt wrong. One minute I was gasping for breath like someone had sucked all the oxygen away. The next, I felt like I was being crushed by invisible weight. It was controlling the air itself, making it thick or thin whenever it wanted. My binoculars shattered. In my hands, without being touched. The radio on my belt screamed and died, its parts falling apart like they'd aged 100 years in seconds. The creature made a sound like metal scraping on rock, and somehow I knew it was laughing. I watched in horror as it showed off what it could do. It created a snowstorm right in front of me, while 10 feet away, the air was so hot it made the rocks steam. It moved faster than any living thing should, breaking the sound barrier without, making a boom. Just silence, terrible silence, followed by that awful screaming wind. Then it did something that made my blood run cold. It reached out with one of its clawed hands, and the snow in front of me started swirling. The swirling snow formed pictures of me. But not just any pictures. I saw myself falling from cliffs, freezing in storms, lying broken at the bottom of ravines. It was showing me all the ways I could die up here. Its voice came through the wind, sounding like 1,000 pieces of metal being torn apart. "Your kind has climbed my mountains for too long, old man." That's when I noticed what it was wearing. If you could call it wearing. Hanging from its body were ranger badges, hundreds of them, some so old the metal had nearly disappeared. I recognized some of them. Badges from rangers who had gone missing over the years, who we'd never found. Badges like the one on my chest right now. The creature floated closer, and the air got so cold, my tears froze on my face. "Just like the others," it said through the howling wind. "But you are different. You have stayed too long. I should have run. Any sane person would have. But 52 years of protecting these mountains does something to a person. Makes them stubborn, maybe, or maybe just responsible. Running would have meant leaving these mountains to this thing, leaving it free to hurt more people, take more badges. I found myself reaching for my father's old climbing rope, the one I'd refused to replace with modern gear. The creature saw this and made that terrible laughing sound again. The wind picked up, cutting through my jacket like it was made of paper. "Your old ways cannot fight the wind itself," it screamed. The badges on its body jingled like terrible wind chimes. That's when I noticed something strange. The creature had everyone's badges except one, my father's. 30 years he'd worked these mountains, and his badge wasn't among the collection. He died of a heart attack in his sleep, in his own bed. He was the only ranger of his generation to die that way. Maybe that's why this thing hated me so much. I was like my father, too stubborn to quit, too connected to these mountains to be scared away. The thought made me stand a little straighter, grip my rope a little tighter. The creature must have seen something change in my face. It rose higher in the air, its wings spreading wider than ever. The wind began to howl like 1,000 lost souls. "Then let us end this, old man," it said. "One final climb, you and me, tomorrow at dawn." Then it was gone, leaving nothing but a circle of frozen air where it had been. I stood there for a long time, my father's rope in my hands, looking. At the highest peak in the park, the one we called Devil's Backbone, I knew where our final battle would be. And I knew that tomorrow, one way or another, my time in these mountains would end. I left a note for Martha that night, just said I was going on an early morning patrol. I couldn't tell her the truth, that I might not come back. I kissed her, sleeping forehead, and picked up my father's old climbing gear one last time. The sun wasn't even up when I reached the base of Devil's Backbone. The air was dead calm, but I knew that wouldn't last. This thing, this creature of the wind, was waiting for me up there. I could feel it. I started climbing just as the first light touched the peak. My joints screamed at me, reminding me I was too old for this. The thin air made my chest tight, but I'd left my oxygen tank behind. This was between me and the creature. No help, no modern gear, just an old ranger and his father's rope. That's when I heard it. That horrible screech of metal on metal. The creature appeared above me, its wings blocking out the morning sun. "Too high for old bones," it taunted. And suddenly the wind picked up, trying to tear me from the rock face. I kept climbing, my fingers finding holds they'd known for 50 years. But the creature wasn't playing fair. It pushed me higher and higher with its wind, past where the air was safe to breathe. My vision started going dark around the edges. My bad eye was almost useless now. Then I heard a pop and hiss. My emergency oxygen tank, the one I kept hidden in my pack, exploded from the pressure. The creature had known it was there all along. It laughed that terrible laugh again. I pulled out the photo of Martha I always carried in my shirt pocket, hoping to look at her face one last time. But the creature's power had turned it into something else a death certificate with my name on it. Today's date was written in frost. That made me angry, real angry. The kind of anger that makes you forget about being tired or old or scared. I reached for the emergency flares in my belt, not to signal for help, but for something else. My hands shook as I lit them, but not. Don't from fear this time. You want to play with wind, I shouted. Let's see how you like this. I threw the flares in a circle around me, just like I'd done 100 times to trigger controlled avalanches. The heat hit the snow above us, and then it started. A wall of white came crashing down. The creature screamed, but this time it wasn't laughing. The avalanche had caught it off guard. It tried to fly away, but the falling snow was too heavy, too fast. For a moment it looked almost afraid, but it recovered quickly. The wind picked up like never before, turning into a tornado that lifted both of us off the mountain. We spun through the air, high above the trees, higher than any human was meant to go. I still had my father's ice axe in my hand. The creature pulled me close, probably thinking it would drop me from this impossible height. But that's what I was waiting for. With every bit of strength I had left, I swung the axe. The blade caught one of its wings, tearing right through the strange, dark membrane. The creature shrieked and we started falling. The ground rushed up at us, the jagged rocks of devils. Backbone getting closer and closer. In those last moments as we fell, I remembered something my father used to say. The mountain always wins. But maybe just this once, it would let an old ranger win too. I twisted in the air, grabbing the creature with both hands. If I was going down, this thing was coming with me. We hit the rocks together, and everything went black. They found us 3 days later. The search party said they'd never seen anything like it. An old ranger and something they couldn't explain, both impaled on the same rock spire. My hands were still locked around its throat, frozen solid in the strange, cold air that surrounded us. The creature's body disappeared before they could get a good look at it. Melted away like frost in the morning sun, they said. All that was left were the ranger badges it had collected over the years, scattered around me like fallen leaves. They also found something else. My father's badge, still pinned to my shirt. The only badge that creature never got, and never would. The wind in Rocky Mountain National Park blows normal now. The birds fly the right way, the snow falls down instead of up, and the clouds are just clouds again. Sometimes, on very quiet nights, you might hear something that sounds like metal scraping on stone, far up on Devil's Backbone, but it's getting fainter every year. They gave me a hero's burial, right here in the park I loved. Martha made sure. They buried me with my boots on, just like I always said a ranger should go. My father's old climbing rope and axe are in the Ranger Station Museum now, behind glass where everyone can see them. But the real story, the true story, is written in the wind. If you listen carefully on the right kind of night, these mountains will tell you about the old ranger who loved them so much, he gave his life to keep them safe. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, you might hear an old man's laugh, floating down from Devil's Backbone, keeping watch over his beloved mountains forever. My name is Ruth Hawkins, and I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me at Blackpaw Creek, something that still gives me nightmares. I've been a park ranger here in the Great Smoky Mountains for 3 years now, and I thought I knew every sound, every smell, and every shadow these woods could throw at me, but I was wrong. So very wrong. It all started last summer in the middle of July. The heat was the kind that makes the air dance above the meadows of Cades Cove, and the sweet smell of honeysuckle was everywhere. You know that feeling when something's not quite right? Like when the music suddenly stops at a party and everyone notices at the same time. That's how it felt when the cicadas went quiet that day. I was doing my usual afternoon patrol when I noticed it. The complete silence. No bird calls, no insect buzzing, nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing and boots crunching on the trail. The storm clouds above were weird too. They just sat there, heavy and dark. But there wasn't even a whisper of wind. Then there was the creek. Blackpaw Creek had always been clear as glass, but that day the water ran black as oil. Some folks in town said it must be from an old coal seam breaking open underground, but old Mr. Johnson, who'd lived here for 80 years, just shook his head when he heard that. "Ain't no coal ever made water run like that," he said, and something in his voice made my skin crawl. Strange things started happening after that. I'd be walking the trails at dusk and see the lightning bugs doing something impossible, blinking in patterns that looked like people dancing in the dark. One morning, I found a group of wild turkeys arranged in a perfect circle, like they were having some kind of meeting, except their heads were twisted completely backward. The trail cameras started picking up weird images too. We usually use them to track bear movements, but instead, we kept getting these blurry shots of something tall and dog-like, standing on two legs. It was always at the edge of the frame, like it knew exactly where to stand to avoid being clearly photographed. But what really started to worry me were the animals we found. Sheep and cattle from nearby farms, cut open with the precision of a surgeon. The incisions were tiny, but somehow entire organs were missing. No animal I know could do that. One day, I was patrolling with Max, my German shepherd. He's the bravest dog I've ever known. He once stood his ground against an angry black bear, but there are certain streams he won't cross now. He just stands there, hackles raised, staring at nothing I can see, whining like a puppy. I tried to ignore these signs at first. Working alone in the woods, it's easy to let your imagination run wild. But then I found the old moonshine still, hidden away in a thicket. It hadn't been used in decades, but there was fresh blood in the copper tubing. And near the creek, I discovered these old Cherokee rock carvings I'd never noticed before. They showed these terrible figures, warriors with wolf heads, feasting on settlers. That's when I knew something was really wrong at Blackpaw Creek. But I had no idea that these strange events were just the beginning. No idea at all that they were somehow connected to my past, to a mistake I've been trying to forget for 2 years. A mistake that was about to come back to haunt me in ways I never could have imagined. I guess I should tell you why I became a park ranger in the first place. Before this, I was a paramedic in the city. I loved my job, helping people, saving lives. Every day was different, and every call meant someone needed me. But 2 years ago, something happened that changed everything. It was a sunny afternoon at Miller's Lake when we got the call. A little girl named Amy had gone underwater and hadn't come up. She was only 5 years old. I can still remember her pink swimsuit with little butterflies on it, floating there in the water. I jumped in without thinking twice. That's what we're trained to do, but when I got to her, I just froze. I'd never frozen before. Not once in 7 years of being a paramedic, but something about seeing her there, so small, so still. My body wouldn't move. My partner had to push past me to get her. By then it was too late. Amy had made me a friendship bracelet the week before. Her mom told me later that Amy had seen me at her school during a safety presentation and decided she wanted to be a helper like me when she grew up. I keep that bracelet under my uniform sleeve now. Sometimes I touch it when I'm scared, though it usually just reminds me that I failed her. That's why I moved here to the mountains. I couldn't handle the sound of sirens anymore. Each one made me see Amy's face. At least out here, the only sirens are the ones warning about wildfires, and those are different. But I still don't sleep much. Most nights, I walk the trails instead. The other rangers think I'm just dedicated to my job, but really, I'm running from my memories. The hardest part of my job now is when there's trouble at the swimming holes. We get a lot of tourists who don't know how dangerous mountain water can be. Whenever there's a water rescue, I radio someone else to handle it. My colleagues probably think I'm lazy, but I can't. Not after Amy. I picked Blackpaw Creek Station specifically because of its name. Amy had this stuffed wolf toy she carried everywhere. The day of the accident, she'd left it in my ambulance after the school visit. I still have it in my locker. At the station, sometimes I talk to it, telling Amy how sorry I am, but lately something feels different about my night walks. The forest seems to be watching me, and sometimes when I pass by the creek, I swear I can hear a child humming. It sounds just like the song Amy used to sing while she colored in the back of the ambulance. I told myself it was just guilt playing tricks on my mind. The anniversary of what happened was coming up, and that always makes things harder. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The forest was changing, and somehow I felt like it had something to do with Amy. I remember the exact moment when I realized this wasn't just in my head. I was doing my evening rounds, checking the camping areas before dark. That's when I saw the first set of tracks, wolf prints that turned into bare human footprints halfway across the mud. Right there, in front of my eyes. No tricks, no confusion, just impossible tracks that made my heart stop. And that was just the beginning of what was coming for me at Blackpaw Creek. After seeing those tracks, things got worse, much worse. It was like whatever was out there knew exactly who I was and what scared me most. One morning I found something that made my blood run cold. There were claw marks on the trees near my cabin, but they weren't random. They spelled out the word guilty at exactly my eye level. I told myself it had to be some kind of prank, maybe teenagers with too much time on their hands. But deep down, I knew better. That same week, something happened with my radio that I still can't explain. I was doing a routine check of the emergency, frequencies when I heard it. A little girl's voice singing "Ring Around the Rosie." I recognized that voice immediately. It was Amy's. I'd heard her sing that same song dozens of times in my ambulance. I dropped the radio like it was on fire. The next day, while checking on some campers, I found a deer. Now, finding dead animals in the woods isn't unusual. It's nature, after all. But this was different. The deer's heart was missing, and the wound was burned shut, like someone had used a hot iron. No animal could do that. No person either. But the worst part, when I looked into Blackpaw Creek to wash my hands afterward, I saw something in my reflection that nearly made me scream. Instead of my face looking back at me, I saw Amy's, blue and lifeless, just like that day at the lake. I backed away so fast I fell over. Then the campers started having problems. The Johnson family's tent was found torn to pieces one morning. But it wasn't torn from the outside. Something had shredded it from the inside. There was blood too. Not much, but enough to form what looked like small handprints. Child-sized handprints. I started noticing other things during my patrols. On full moon nights, there would be this massive shadow on the ground. But when I looked up, there was nothing. Casting it, just empty air. The trail markers started showing up in weird places too, arranged to spell out Amy's name. When I checked the GPS coordinates of where they pointed, my hands started shaking. They matched exactly with Miller's Lake, where Amy had drowned. One day, I went back to my cabin and found something that shouldn't have been possible. My old childhood diary was sitting on my desk, but I hadn't brought it with me to Blackpaw Creek. It should have been in my mum's attic hundreds of miles away. When I opened it, every page was filled with the same words over and over, "You let me die." The smell was the final straw. One evening, while walking near the creek, the air suddenly filled with the sharp scent of chlorine, just like the pool where Amy had died. But we were miles from any swimming pool, miles from anything but trees and dirt and that dark flowing water. I knew I should have told someone what was happening. Maybe called in sick or asked for a transfer, but something kept me there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was a need to face whatever this thing was. Or maybe, deep down, I felt like I deserved what was happening to me. I just didn't know then that what I thought was the worst of it was only the beginning. That thing in the woods, it wasn't just playing with me anymore. It was getting ready to show itself. And when it did, well, That's when I learned what true fear really feels like. I'll never forget the night I finally saw it. I was doing my usual evening patrol, flashlight beam cutting through the fog that had settled over Blackpaw Creek. The air was so quiet, you could hear water dripping from the leaves. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, heavy ones like someone wearing boots, but somehow wrong. When I turned around, my flashlight caught something that shouldn't exist. It was standing there, tall as a basketball hoop, looking down at me. It had the body of a man, but was covered in dark matted fur. Its face was like a wolf's, but bigger, with a long snout that dripped something black like creek water. But its eyes, they glowed green, the same color as the algae that had been floating in the pool where Amy died. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then it spoke and my heart nearly stopped. "Why didn't you save me, Miss Ruth?" It was Amy's voice. Exactly her voice, with that little lisp she had from her missing front tooth, coming from this thing's mouth. I ran, wouldn't you? But wherever I went, it followed. Sometimes I'd see it slide through solid rock like water, appearing on the other side as if the stone was just air. When I shot at it, yes, rangers carry guns, the bullets just sank into its flesh, and the wounds closed up right away, like someone sewing with invisible thread. It kept talking to me in different voices. Sometimes Amy's, sometimes my own voice, sometimes the voices of other people I knew. It was like it could reach into my head and pull out any sound it wanted. Wherever it stepped, the ground burned. Not with fire, but like acid had been poured. There, perfect paw prints that killed the grass and left smoking holes in the dirt. And its neck, this is going to sound crazy, but it had these slits like a fish's gills. I saw it dive into the creek once and stay under for hours, but the worst part wasn't how it looked or what it could do. The worst part was what happened when it got close to me. Suddenly, I'd be back there at Miller's Lake, not just remembering it, living it. Feeling the cold water, seeing Amy's little hand just out of reach, experiencing that horrible moment when I froze up, over and over and over again. One day I followed its tracks. They led me to a cave deep in the woods. Inside I found toys, dozens of them. Children's toys, all lined up on rock shelves. Each one had a date carved into it. When I looked closer, I realized they were death dates. And there, right in the middle, was Amy's stuffed wolf, the one I thought was still in my locker. The date carved into it was the day she drowned. I should have left right then, should have run as far as I could. But something kept me there at Blackpaw Creek. Maybe it was because I finally understood. This thing wasn't just some random monster. It had chosen me. It was feeding off my guilt, growing stronger with every memory it forced me to relive. And then one night, my partner Mark came to check on me. He hadn't heard from me in days, he said. He was worried. The moment I saw him walking up to my cabin, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake, because now the creature had something else to use against me, something worse than memories. I tried to warn Mark to leave. I really did. But by then, it was too late. The thing in the woods had found a new way to hurt me. Mark didn't believe me at first. Of course he didn't. Who would? But he didn't have to wait long to see for himself. The creature showed up just as I was telling him to leave. Its massive shadow falling across my cabin's front door. "Run!" I screamed. But the creature was faster. It moved like water, flowing around trees and over rocks, herding us toward Blackpaw Creek, the same creek that had been running black for weeks now. The water there was exactly as deep as Miller's Lake, the place where Amy died. This wasn't a coincidence. We ran until our lungs burned. Mark kept shooting backwards with his service weapon, but the bullets might as well have been mosquito bites. The creature just shook them off and kept coming. That's when I noticed something strange. Every time I felt scared, every time I remembered Amy, the creature seemed to get bigger, stronger. Its eyes glowed brighter and it moved faster. That's when it hit me. This thing was feeding off my guilt, my fear, my memories. The worse I felt, the more powerful it became. We ended up trapped between the creature and the rushing water of Blackpaw Creek. Mark pushed me behind him, trying to protect me. That's when I saw something that made everything make horrible sense. Near the creek bank was an old logbook, half buried in mud. I grabbed it while Mark kept the creature distracted. The book belonged to a ranger named James Miller, Amy's father, the same man who had quit the service right after his daughter died. The pages were full of weird writing and drawings. James had been studying old Cherokee legends about spirit animals and revenge magic. He blamed me for Amy's death, and he'd done something terrible trying to make me pay. He'd created this thing, this dogman, using dark magic he found in the mountains, but it had gotten out of his control. I barely had time to process this when Mark suddenly shouted, "Ruth, run, now!" I looked up to see him charging at the creature, trying to give me time to escape. The creature caught him easily, its massive paws wrapping around Mark's body. They both went tumbling into the creek. I ran to help, but stopped at the water's edge. The same fear that had frozen me when Amy was drowning gripped me again. I watched helplessly as Mark fought with the creature in the black water. "The station!" Mark's voice came up from the churning water. "Get to the station! You know how to stop it now!" Then they both went under and the creek turned red with blood. I ran to the ranger station, my mind racing. The creature fed on guilt and fear. My guilt and fear, and I knew there was something in that station that might just be able to help, something that could maybe end this nightmare once and for all. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Not at all, because when the creature came for me at the station, it wasn't alone, and what I saw nearly drove me mad. I made it to the ranger station and locked myself inside. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my keys. But I knew what I had to do. The station had an old industrial defibrillator, the kind we use for heart attacks. Water conducts electricity. Maybe, just maybe, it could work. I heard it before I saw it. Heavy footsteps on the station's wooden porch. But when I turned around, I wasn't ready for what I saw. The creature was there, but Mark's face was now stuck to its chest, eyes wide open, staring at me. His ranger hat was perched crookedly on the creature's wolf head, like some sick trophy. "He died trying to save you," it said in Mark's voice, "just like Amy. Everyone who tries to help you dies, Ruth." I backed away, grabbing the defibrillator from its case. The creature followed me, herding me toward the creek again. But this time, I let it push me that way. I needed it to follow me into the water. "You're right," I told it. "I did let Amy die." I froze up. I failed her. My voice was shaking, but I kept talking. "But you're not Amy. You're not even her father's revenge anymore. You're just a monster that feeds on pain." It lunged at me then, and we both fell into the creek. The black water was ice cold, but I held onto the defibrillator. The creature grabbed me, pulling me under, and that's when I did it. I turned on the defibrillator at full power and pressed it against the water. The electricity lit up the creek like lightning. The creature screamed, not in Amy's voice, not in Mark's, but in a sound I can't even describe. It thrashed and twisted, its body glowing from the inside like a horrible light bulb, but it didn't die. Instead, it crawled out of the water, bigger than ever, smoke rising from its fur. I ran back to the station and grabbed the emergency flare gun. I fired at the boxes of emergency flares stored inside, and everything went up in flames. I jumped in my truck and drove. The whole forest behind me was on fire now, but in my rearview mirror I could see the creature running after me. Even at 70 miles per hour, it kept pace, those glowing eyes fixed on my truck. I made it out. I'm still not sure how. But I've never gone back to Blackpaw Creek. The official report said a faulty wire started the fire that burned down half the forest. They never found Mark's body. These days, I'm living in a different kind of place. The walls are white and the doctors are nice. They say I had a breakdown from the guilt over Amy's death. They say the creature wasn't real, but every day I draw the same picture over and over. a tall, wolf-like creature wearing a ranger hat. And sometimes, late at night, I hear Amy's voice singing "Ring Around the Rosie" in the hallway. Maybe the doctors are right. Maybe it was all in my head. But if you're ever hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains and you come across a creek with water running black as oil, turn around. Turn around and run, because guilt isn't just a feeling. Sometimes it takes shape. Sometimes it grows fangs and claws, and sometimes it comes looking for you. My name is Marshall Jenkins, and I've been running from fire my whole life. Funny how I ended up here in Olympic National Park, the wettest place in the country, where the trees are always dripping and the fog never really lifts. Maybe that's exactly why I chose it. After what happened to my brother Tommy, I needed a place where flames couldn't follow. I'm a park ranger now, but I used to be a firefighter. That was before the night I couldn't save Tommy, before I watched that warehouse and turn into his coffin of flames while I stood there, my hands burning on that metal door handle, listening to him scream my name. The doctors fixed my palms, but the scars are still there. Sometimes I catch myself rubbing them when it rains. The sound of water on the roof still sounds too much like crackling flames. These days I carry Tommy with me everywhere I go. His ashes sit in a small urn in my truck, and his melted St. Florian medal hangs around my neck. St. Florian, the patron saint of firefighters. Fat lot of good he did us that night. Still, I can't bring myself to take it off. It's the last thing I have of him, besides the ashes and the nightmares. Devil's Pass isn't what most people picture when they think of a national park. Sure, we've got the massive Sitka spruce trees and the Roosevelt elk, but there's something different about this place. The mist here has a mind of its own. Sometimes at sunset, it turns this weird amber color, and the shadows don't make sense. They don't match up with where they should be coming from. Just yesterday I watched spruce needles floating upward instead of falling, collecting on the fog like some kind of upside-down carpet. I've been noticing stranger things lately. The hot springs near my usual patrol route started bubbling with something that looks more like black tar than water. The local elk herd, usually pretty skittish, I found them standing completely still the other day, their eyes pure white, like they were in some kind of trance. My compass has been acting weird too. Instead of pointing north, the needle follows specific hikers as they walk by. I tried to tell my supervisor about it, but he just laughed it off, said the dampness was probably messing with the mechanism. The worst part is the petroglyphs. We've got these ancient rock carvings out here, and I swear they're changing. Every morning, when I check them on my rounds, they show different scenes, things that happened just the day before. I started taking pictures to prove I wasn't going. Crazy, but the photos come out blurry every time. I've been having trouble sleeping lately. I still keep my boots on and sleep in the bathtub. Old habits from my firefighting days, when every second counted. My partner at the station used to catch me practicing rescue, carries on this old mannequin I dressed up in Tommy's old clothes. She thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. The other rangers think I'm paranoid, especially during dry season. I check the weather reports obsessively, looking for any sign of lightning strikes or fire warnings, but they don't understand. They haven't seen what fire can do. How it can take everything you love in just a few minutes. This morning, something happened that I can't explain away. I was walking my usual trail when I noticed my boot prints were filling up with something dark behind me. At first, I thought it was just rainwater, but when I bent down to look closer, it was crude oil. Oil that definitely wasn't there before. And the weird thing is, it was only in my prints, nowhere else on the trail. I talk to Tommy's urn sometimes during my long patrols. I tell him about the strange things I'm seeing, ask him what he thinks it all means. Obviously, he never answers. But lately I could swear I've been hearing whispers in the wind that sound just like his voice. I think something's watching me out here in Devil's Pass. Something that knows about Tommy, about the fire, about everything I've been trying to forget. And I have a feeling it's just getting started. The mushrooms out here have started growing in these perfect spirals. One of our scientists said they match human DNA sequences, but that's impossible, right? And the ravens, God, the ravens are the worst. They've started talking in human voices, repeating what sounds like people's last words. I try not to listen, but sometimes I catch phrases that make my blood run cold. There are certain parts of the trail where the ground vibrates beneath my feet, like there's a giant heart beating under the earth. I've started avoiding those sections, taking the long way around. But somehow, no matter which path I choose, I always end up back there, feeling that rhythmic pulse through my boots. I thought coming to the wettest place in America would keep me safe from the flames. But now I'm starting to wonder if I've walked into something even worse. Tommy, if you can hear me, I could really use your help right about now, because I think the darkness in Devil's Pass is starting to notice me, and I don't like the way it's looking back. It started with the hiking journals. We found them scattered along the trails, regular notebooks that tourists use to write about their trips. But something was wrong with these. The dates in them. People were writing entries days after they'd gone missing. I know it sounds crazy, but I held those journals in my hands. I read words written by people who weren't there anymore. Then, the trail cameras started showing pictures of me in places I'd never been. I remember staring at one photo for what felt like hours. It showed me standing by Old Creek Bridge at sunset last Tuesday, but I was miles away that day, doing paperwork at the ranger station. I even checked my logbook to make sure. That's when I met Diane, the new ranger. She was different from the others. She actually listened when I told her about the weird stuff happening in the park. She didn't laugh or tell me I was being paranoid. Instead, she started helping me investigate. "Look at this, Marshall," she said one morning, showing me her phone. It was a thermal image of me standing by the visitor center. Except there were two heat signatures where I should have been. Like there were two of me standing in the exact same spot. But the really scary stuff started happening when I was alone on patrol. One night, I was checking the emergency radio, standard procedure, when I heard Tommy's voice coming through on a channel that shouldn't even exist. "Marshall, Marshall, where are you? It's so hot in here." I threw the radio so hard it shattered against the wall, but I could still hear his voice, like it was coming from inside my head. The footprints were the next thing. I'd be walking along the trail and notice another set of prints next to mine. At first, I thought someone was following me, but when I looked closer, the prints matched my boots exactly, down to the worn spot on the left heel. They would appear and disappear randomly, like someone was walking beside me, but only leaving marks when they felt like it. One evening, I was doing my final rounds when I saw smoke rising above the trees. My heart started racing like it always does when I see fire, but I forced myself to check it out. It's part of my job, after all. As I got closer, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The smoke was forming a shape against the night sky, the exact shape of Tommy, the way he looked that night, reaching out through the flames. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran all the way back to my truck and sat there shaking, talking to Tommy's urn like I always do when I'm scared. But this time, when I looked in the rearview mirror, it wasn't my face looking back at me. It was Tommy's. Diane found me the next morning, still sitting in my truck. She brought me coffee and listened as I tried to explain what happened. While I was talking, my GPS tracker started going crazy, showing that I was somehow moving through solid rock on the other side of the park. "Something's not right here," Diane said, stating the obvious. "We need to figure out what's going on before anyone else goes missing." I agreed with her, but I didn't tell her about the worst thing I'd seen. Earlier that week, I'd found my own body on the trail. It was wearing my uniform, my boots, even my brother's medal. The only difference was the watch on its wrist. It was showing tomorrow's date. When I blinked, the body was gone, but I knew what I'd seen. The other rangers started reporting seeing me in places I couldn't possibly be. They'd wave to me on one trail while I was patrolling another miles away. Sometimes they'd see me talking to hikers, giving directions, acting completely normal. Except I was never there. Every time I looked into a stream or lake now, I saw Tommy's face instead of mine. Not Tommy the way he looked in the fire, but Tommy the way he used to be, smiling, healthy, alive. Sometimes he'd wink at me, or his lips would move like he was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear him over the sound of my own heart pounding. I started carrying a camera everywhere, trying to document what was happening. But every time I took a picture of something strange, it would come out blurry or completely black. It was like whatever was out there didn't want to be recorded. Diane stuck with me through all of it. She helped me set up motion sensors and extra cameras around the park. We started mapping out where the weird stuff was happening most often, but every time we thought we were getting close to understanding something, everything would change, like whatever we were dealing with was always one step ahead of us. One night, as we were reviewing our evidence, Diane looked at me with worried eyes. "Marshall," she said quietly, "I don't think we're dealing with normal park problems anymore. I think something's targeting you specifically. And I think it has. Something to do with your brother." She was right, and what happened next proved it in the worst possible way. I'll never forget the first time I saw it clearly. I was doing a night patrol near the old hiking trails when I heard Tommy's laugh. Not from my memories, but real and close, like he was standing right behind me. When I turned around, there he was. It looked exactly like Tommy, the way he was. Before the fire. Same messy brown hair, same crooked smile, even that little scar on his chin from when we crashed our bikes as kids. But something was wrong. The way it moved wasn't quite right, like someone wearing a Tommy costume who didn't quite know how to act like him. "Hey, little brother," it said, using Tommy's voice perfectly. "Miss me?" I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. It came closer, and I noticed its feet didn't leave any prints in the mud. It reached out to touch my shoulder, and that's when I felt it. This horrible cold feeling, like my memories were being pulled out through my skin. "Remember that time we stole Dad's car to go fishing?" it asked, telling me things only Tommy could know. "Remember how we had to push it back into the garage because we killed the battery? Remember how scared we were that he'd find out?" Each memory it spoke about felt like it was fading, getting fuzzy around the edges. I stumbled backward, trying to get away, but it followed me. "Or how about the night of the fire, Marshall? Want to relive that one again?" Suddenly I was back there, standing outside the burning warehouse, feeling the heat of the door handle burning into my palms. I could hear Tommy screaming my name. But this time, I could see through the windows. The thing that looked like Tommy was in there too, watching, smiling. I ran, made it back to my truck somehow, and drove straight to Diane's cabin. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. Told her about the thing that could look like Tommy, how it seemed to feed on memories. While I was talking, she started pulling out old files, newspaper clippings, reports of missing hikers going back years. "Look at this," she said, spreading photos on her table. They showed people who'd been found after going missing in the park. They were alive, but empty. Couldn't remember their own names, their families, anything about their lives. "It's called a skinwalker," Diane explained. She'd been doing research ever since I first told her about the weird stuff happening in the park. "It's a shapeshifter that steals memories and can become anything it touches. And I think it's been here for a long time. Over the next few days, we saw it more and more. Sometimes it would be Tommy. Sometimes it would be other missing people. Once, I even saw it turn into a tree right in front of me. Just melted and stretched until it was part of the forest. The worst part was, it could be in more than one place at the same time. We'd spot it up by the north trails, then get reports of it down by the visitor center minutes later. It was like it could split itself into pieces, each one wearing a different stolen face. It started creating these weird time loops too. I'd find myself reliving moments from that night of the fire over and over. But each time was slightly different, like it was playing with the memories, trying to make them hurt more. One morning, Diane and I found a fog bank that was playing. Memories like a movie screen, showing pieces of people's lives that the skinwalker had stolen. We saw birthdays, weddings, deaths, all these private moments it had taken from its victims. Why is it so focused on you? Diane asked me one night as we were going through more old reports. Why your brother? I didn't have an answer then, but later, when I was alone in my cabin, the skinwalker showed up again. This time it told me the truth. It had been pretending to be Tommy's ghost for years, feeding on my guilt and grief like some kind of memory vampire. "You're so delicious," it said, wearing Tommy's face, but speaking in a voice that wasn't his anymore. "All that pain, all that guilt, I could feed on you forever." That's when I realized this had to end, not just for me, but for everyone who'd lost their memories to this thing. For Tommy's memory, which it had been twisting and using against me. I looked at Diane's research spread out on my table. There had to be a way to stop it. And somewhere in all those old reports and legends, we were going to find it. But the skinwalker wasn't going to make it easy. It knew we were looking for answers, and it was done playing around. That night, as I was falling asleep, I heard Tommy's voice one last time. "Ready for the real fun to begin, little brother?" Diane and I spent every free minute trying to understand what we were dealing with. We turned her cabin into a kind of research center with maps pinned to the walls showing where people had gone missing, where the skinwalker had been seen, and where the weirdest things had happened in the park. "Look at this pattern," Diane said one morning, drawing lines between the spots where people had lost their memories. "It's not random. It's like a spiral, getting closer and closer to your usual patrol route." She was right. The skinwalker had been circling me for months, maybe even years, getting closer all the time. All those strange things I'd seen, the moving shadows, the weird footprints, the talking ravens, they were just it, testing me, playing with me. We found an old journal in the park's archives, written by a ranger from the 1950s. He wrote about seeing something that could change shapes, something that left people empty as shells after it touched them. But the most important thing we learned was about its weakness. "It can't handle strong emotions," I said, reading from the journal. "Especially not when they're connected to the memories it's stolen. It's like trying to eat something that's too hot. It burns them." That's when we started interviewing the families of the people who'd gotten away from the skinwalker. They all said the same thing. Their loved ones had escaped when they focused hard on their strongest memories, especially ones about love or loss. That's why it's so interested in you, Diane realized. Your grief for Tommy, your guilt about the fire, those are powerful emotions, but they're also painful ones. It's like a perfect meal for this thing. We kept digging, looking for anything that might help us fight it. The skinwalker didn't make it easy. It started messing with our research, moving papers around when we weren't looking, changing words in the documents we were reading, even making some of our notes disappear completely. One night as we were working late, Diane found something in an old newspaper. There had been a huge fire in the park back in the 1800s, way before it was a national park. The article talked about Native American legends of a creature that wore the faces of the dead and how they had trapped it in a burning forest. Fire, I whispered. That's why it kept making me relive Tommy's death. It was afraid I'd figure out its weakness. Just then, the lights in Diane's cabin went out. In the darkness, I heard Tommy's voice, but it was coming from everywhere at once. "Clever boy," it said, and I could hear the anger in its voice. "But do you really think you can use fire against me? You can barely look at a match without shaking." It was right. Ever since losing Tommy, I couldn't even light a campfire without having a panic attack. The skinwalker had made sure my biggest weapon against it was also my biggest fear. "We need to do something," Diane said, her voice steady even though I could tell she was scared. "It's getting stronger. Those people in town who've been forgetting things. That's it feeding, and it's getting bolder." She was right. Just that morning, we'd gotten reports of 3 people walking into the ranger station, unable to remember their own names. The skinwalker was done hiding. It was hunting in the open now. We spent that night making plans, looking at maps, trying to figure out where we might be able to trap it. But every time we thought we had a good idea, I'd remember something else from the old reports that showed why it wouldn't work. "There's really only one way," Diane finally said, looking at me with serious eyes. "We have to use ourselves as bait. We have to make it think it's winning." I knew she was right, but I also knew the skinwalker was listening to every word we said. It was probably watching us right then, wearing who knows whose face, planning its own trap. That night, before I left Diane's cabin, I found a note in my jacket pocket. It was written in Tommy's handwriting. "See you soon, little brother, and this time I promise you won't get away." Everything went wrong the next evening. The skinwalker made its move first, and it was worse than anything we'd expected. I was doing my usual patrol when I got a call from Diane on the radio. Her voice was shaking. "Marshal, it has me. I'm at the old fire tower. Please, please hurry." I knew it was probably a trap, but I also knew I couldn't take the chance that it wasn't. I jumped in my truck and drove as fast as I could toward the tower. When I got there, I saw Diane standing at the top of the tower, but I also saw her on the ground near the base. And there was another Diane walking out of the trees. The skinwalker had split itself into 3 parts, and each one was wearing her face. "Which one is real?" they all asked at the same time, using her voice. "Better choose quickly, Marshal. I don't think all of us are going to make it through the night." That's when I smelled smoke. I turned around and saw walls of fire rising up through the trees, making a circle around the tower. My heart started racing, and I could feel my hands shaking. The skinwalker had turned the forest into a copy of the warehouse where Tommy died. "What's wrong, little brother?" Now it was Tommy's voice, coming from all 3 Dianes. "Scared of a little fire?" I wanted to run. Every part of me was screaming to get away from the flames, but then I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. A real scream, Diane's real voice. Coming from inside the tower, the skinwalker had forced me into my worst nightmare. I had to walk through fire to save someone I cared about, just like with Tommy, and this time I couldn't fail. I pulled out Tommy's old lighter, the one I'd been carrying but never could use since the warehouse fire. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. "You can't do it," the skinwalker taunted, still using all 3 Diane shapes to surround me. "You're too afraid, just like last time, just like with Tommy." But something was different now. The fear was still there, but so was anger. This thing had been feeding on my grief, twisting Tommy's memory, hurting innocent people. It was time to end it. I flicked the lighter. The tiny flame felt like it was 1,000,000 miles away, but I forced myself to look at it. "Tommy," I whispered, "help me do this." I started walking toward the tower. The heat was intense and every step felt like walking through molten lead, but I kept going. Behind me, I heard the skinwalker hissing in frustration. That's when the real Diane made her move. She'd managed to get free while the skinwalker was focused on me, and she came running out of the tower with an old gas can we'd hidden there earlier. "Now, Marshal!" she shouted, throwing the gas in a circle around the nearest Diane shape. I touched the lighter to the gas, and flames shot up in a perfect ring. The skinwalker screamed, not with Diane's voice anymore, but with a sound like tearing metal. The Diane shape inside the fire ring started to melt, revealing something dark and twisted underneath. But we'd only trapped one part of it. The other 2 Diane shapes were still coming. And now they were changing too, shifting between different faces. Tommy, missing hikers, even me. That's when Diane did something I'll never forget. She ran straight at one of the shapes, tackling it into an ancient cedar tree. "It can't shift if it's trapped inside something else," she yelled. "Finish it!" The skinwalker howled as part of it got stuck in the tree, but the last piece, the one wearing Tommy's face now, was still free. It came at me fast, reaching for my face with hands that weren't quite human anymore. "Let me show you what really happened that night," it snarled. "Let me show you how Tommy really died." But this time, I was ready. I held up Tommy's lighter and looked right into its eyes. "You want to see my memories," I said. "Here's one for you." I dropped the lighter onto the trail where we'd poured more gas earlier. Flames raced out in the pattern we'd planned. Not a circle this time, but a spiral, like the one the skinwalker had used to hunt its victims. The thing wearing Tommy's face tried to run, but the fire was too fast. It got caught in the spiral, and that's when something strange happened. All the memories it had stolen started pouring out of it like smoke. Faces, voices, pieces of people's lives floating up into the night sky. I saw Tommy in there too, the real Tommy, not the skinwalker's twisted version. Just for a second he looked at me and smiled. Then he was gone, along with all the other stolen memories, finally free. The skinwalker burned, but it didn't die. The last thing I saw was it wearing Diane's face again, its eyes full of hate as it melted into the shadows between the trees. We'd hurt it bad, but it wasn't over. I ran to check on Diane. She was alive but badly hurt from tackling the skinwalker into the tree. As I helped her up, she grabbed my arm. "It'll be back," she whispered. "It won't stop until it has you." She was right, and that's why I couldn't stay. That was 3 years ago. I haven't stayed in one place since then. I left Devil's Pass the morning after our fight with the skinwalker. Diane understood why I had to go. She's still there, working as a ranger, keeping watch. We talk on the phone sometimes, but never for too long. It's safer that way. I move every few months, taking odd jobs, living in small towns. I never tell anyone my real name or my story. Tommy's urn and his St. Florian medal are still with me. They're the only things I kept from my old life. But the skinwalker follows me. It's patient and it's angry. Every year, like clockwork, I get an envelope with no return address. Inside is always a photo of Diane, or something wearing her face, standing outside wherever I'm living at the time. It's the skinwalker's way of letting me know it hasn't forgotten. The photos are different each time. Sometimes Diane is smiling and waving like a tourist. Sometimes she's just standing there, staring at the camera. The latest one showed up last week. Diane was holding a lighter, and her eyes were completely black. I know I can't run forever. Someday it will catch up to me, but I'm not the same scared person I was back at Devil's Pass. I've learned to live with fire again. I carry Tommy's lighter everywhere, and I practice using it every day. When the time comes, I'll be ready. The weird thing is, I'm not afraid anymore. Not of fire, not even of the skinwalker. Because that night at the fire tower, when all those stolen memories were floating away like smoke, I saw something the skinwalker didn't mean to show me. I saw the truth about Tommy. He wasn't screaming my name that night because he was scared. He was telling me to stay back, to save myself. His last act was trying to protect me. The skinwalker had been twisting that memory all these years, feeding on my guilt, making me think I failed him. But I didn't fail Tommy, and I won't fail the next time the skinwalker comes for me. Sometimes at night, when I'm driving down empty roads between towns, I talk to Tommy's urn like I used to. But now I tell him different things. I tell him about the people I've helped, the kids I've taught to be careful with fire, the good things I've managed to do, even while running. I know the skinwalker is probably listening. Let it listen. Let it learn that memories aren't just food, and guilt isn't the only strong emotion. Love is stronger. So is forgiveness, especially forgiving yourself. Yesterday, I got a text from Diane. 3 hikers showed up at Devil's Pass, confused and scared. Their memories were gone. The skinwalker is hunting again. So maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to go back to Devil's Pass, back to where it all started. I've learned a lot in these 3 years about fire, about fear, about facing the things that haunt you. The skinwalker thinks it knows all my memories, all my fears. But it doesn't know about the new memories I've made, the strength I've found. It doesn't know that every time it sends me those pictures of Diane, it's just reminding me what I'm fighting for. Tommy's lighter feels comfortable in my hand now, and somewhere in the darkness, wearing who knows whose face, the skinwalker is waiting. This time, I'm ready. This time, I'm hunting it. My name is Claudia Watson, and I'm going to tell you about the thing that took my father in the Everglades. I've been a park ranger here for 7 years, just like Dad was before he vanished. Most people think I'm crazy for staying in this swamp after what happened, but I know there's more to his disappearance than anyone believes. Today feels different from the moment I step into my airboat. The air is thick and heavy, like trying to breathe through a wet blanket. August in Florida is always humid, but this morning the moisture hangs in the air like it's afraid to fall. Even the mangrove trees around me are dripping water that never seems to hit the surface below. Something's not right with my usual route today. I've taken this path hundreds of times, but the Spanish moss keeps catching in my boat's propellers. The strange thing is, I swear that moss wasn't there just seconds ago. It's like it's growing right in front of my eyes, reaching out to grab my boat. That's when I notice the alligators. Usually they mind their own business, floating wherever they please. But today, at least a dozen of them are lined up belly up in the water, forming a perfect arrow pointing deeper into the swamp. In all my years here, I've never seen anything like it. The sawgrass is acting strange too. Even though the wind is blowing from the east, the tall grass is swaying in the opposite direction. As I watch, it starts weaving itself together, forming shapes that look almost human. I rub my eyes, thinking it must be the heat playing tricks on me, but the shapes are still there. I cut the airboat's engine and check my GPS to mark my location. But something's wrong with that too. According to the screen, I'm moving, even though I'm sitting completely still. My heart starts beating faster as I remember the last words in Dad's water-damaged journal. The swamp is alive. It knows we're here. Just then, I spot something that makes my blood run cold. The solid ground I was heading towards suddenly turns into quicksand. And in it, there are footprints forming one by one, perfect footprints, like someone invisible is walking across it. Above the footprints, the water hyacinths, those pretty purple floating flowers, suddenly group together to spell out a word: daughter. The mosquitoes, usually just an annoying cloud, start swarming in a very specific pattern. My hands shake as I pull out my father's old ranger badge from my pocket. The number on it matches exactly what the mosquitoes are forming in the air. Near the shore, the knees of the bald cypress trees, those woody projections that stick up from the water, begin shifting and moving. They're arranging themselves to look like skeletal hands reaching out of the swamp. I've seen a lot of strange things in these waters, but nothing like this. As I drift further in, I come across something that shouldn't be here. A small plane, probably belonged to drug runners who use the remote parts of the park. But what catches my eye isn't the plane itself. It's the fact that it's completely covered in strangler figs. The locals say these vines can grow fast, but not overnight. Yet this plane looks like it's been here for years, even though I know. This area was clear yesterday. The swamp is trying to tell me something. After all these years of searching, maybe it's finally ready to reveal what happened to my father. Or maybe, just maybe, it's leading me into a trap. Either way, I know I have to follow these signs. Dad always said the Everglades had their own kind of magic. Now I'm starting to understand exactly what he meant. I grip his old ranger hat, the one I wear every day, a little tighter, and turn my boat toward the direction the alligators are pointing. Whatever's waiting for me deeper in the swamp, I'm ready to face it. I have to know the truth no matter what it costs me. I should probably tell you more about why I'm out here, searching these swamps day after day. It all started during Hurricane Andrew in 1991. Dad was working overtime, helping people evacuate and keeping an eye on the park. That was the kind of person he was, always putting others first. The night the hurricane hit, he radioed in one last time from somewhere deep in the swamp. Then, nothing. They never found his body. I keep his last field journal in my waterproof bag. The pages are wrinkled and stained from the rain that night, but I can still make out some of what he wrote. There's one phrase that keeps showing up, guardian of the swamp. I've read those words so many times, trying to figure out what he meant. That's why I studied botany in college. Dad's journal was full of strange notes about the plants here, how they moved in ways they shouldn't, how they seemed to communicate with each other. Everyone thought he was just being poetic, but I knew better. I knew my father. He wasn't the kind of man who imagined things. I touched the brim of his old ranger hat, the one I'm wearing right now. It's funny how the sweat stains on it matches exactly, like the hat remembers its first owner. Mum used to hate seeing me wear it. She died believing Dad had just walked away from us, found some other life somewhere else. But I knew in my gut that wasn't true. Something happened to him out here, something he tried to warn everyone about. For 7 years, I've been mapping every strange thing I've seen in these swamps. Every plant that grew too fast, every tree that moved when it shouldn't have. My colleagues at the ranger station think I'm obsessed. Maybe I am. Last month they found me testing the swamp water, trying to build up a resistance to anything that might be in it. They sent me home for 3 days after that. These searches have cost me more than just my reputation. Tom, my fiancé, left 6 months ago. We were supposed to be planning our wedding, but I kept putting it off to patrol the same areas over and over. It's like you're married to this swamp, he said the night he walked out. Maybe he was right. But the worst part is the dreams. They started about a year after Dad disappeared. In them, I hear him calling to me from under the lily pads. His voice sounds weird, like he's trying to talk underwater. Sometimes I wake up thinking I can still hear him, even though I'm in my own bed miles away from the swamp. I pull out my map, checking off today's section. The other rangers don't understand why I keep searching the same places. But the swamp, it changes. Places that were solid ground yesterday become deep water today. Paths that were clear disappear overnight. It's like the whole park is alive, shifting and moving when we're not looking. A splash nearby makes me jump. Just a fish. But for a second, I thought I heard my name in the sound of the water. That happens a lot out here. The swamp plays tricks on your mind, Dad used to say. But what if they weren't tricks at all? What if he was trying to tell us something important? I check my watch. It's getting late, and the sun creates weird shadows through the cypress trees. I should head back to the station, but something tells me I need to stay. Those signs I saw earlier, the footprints, the message in the flowers, the strange behavior of the animals, they all mean something. And today, finally, I think the swamp might be ready to show me what really happened to my father. I decide to get out of my airboat to check something that caught my eye, a flash of metal in the sun. Big mistake. The moment my feet touch the ground, I hear a creaking sound behind me. When I turn around, I can hardly believe my eyes. The mangrove roots are moving, actually moving, weaving themselves around my boat like a cage. Within seconds, my only way out is trapped. My hands are shaking as I pull out my phone to call for help. No signal. Of course there's no signal. I've been out here hundreds of times, but something feels different today. The air is too still, like the swamp is holding its breath. That's when I see it. Dad's ranger badge. It's stuck in the trunk of a cypress tree like someone pushed it deep into the bark. But that's impossible. The tree has grown around it, the metal almost completely covered by wood. When I reach out to touch it, my finger comes away wet. The tree is bleeding. Not sap, but real red blood. I stumble backward, my heart pounding. The orchids around me suddenly burst into bloom, all at once. The air fills with their sweet smell, but it's too sweet, making my head spin. The trees start to look like they're dancing, and I hear whispers in the wind that sound almost like words. Looking down, I notice bubbles forming in the mud at my feet. But these aren't normal bubbles. They're arranging themselves into letters. My blood runs cold as I read the message. He fed us. Now you feed us. I reach for my satellite phone, my backup plan. But as I pull it out, the strangler figs hanging from the trees above me spring to life. They wrap around the antenna, crushing it like it's made of paper. Now I'm really alone out here. The mud starts pulling at my legs, trying to drag me down. It's up to my knees before I remember something. Dad's name. "James Watson!" I shout, and just like that, the mud releases me. I scramble back, breathing hard. Movement catches my eye. Water moccasins, some of the deadliest snakes in the swamp, are sliding through the water, but they're not coming for me. Instead, they're forming a circle around an old banyan tree, like they're protecting it. I've never seen snakes act like this. A sharp pain in my arm makes me jump. The saw palmetto leaves are cutting through my uniform, but there's no wind moving them. As I watch, my own blood drips onto the ground, forming what looks like a map. My hands are trembling as I follow where the blood map leads. It takes me to a cluster of pitcher plants, those carnivorous plants that trap and digest insects. In one of them, gleaming in the murky liquid, is my father's wedding ring. The plant's digestive juices haven't damaged it at all, like it was just placed there. Then I hear it. The swamp sounds, the croaking of frogs, the buzz of insects, the splash of water. They're changing, merging together into words that make my skin crawl. The green claims its own daughter. I want to run. Every instinct is screaming at me to get out of here. But I can't. Not now. Not when I'm so close to finding out what happened to Dad. The swamp is trying to tell me something, trying to show me something. And whatever it is, it's been waiting for me for a long time. The sun is getting lower, casting long shadows through the trees. The air is getting cooler, but I'm sweating. Everything around me feels alive and aware. The trees, the mud, even the air itself. Something is coming, something that knows who I am, something that knew my father. I grip his old ranger hat tighter and take a deep breath. Whatever's out there, in the gathering darkness, whatever took my father, it wants me to follow. And right now, even though I'm terrified, that's exactly what I'm going to do. That's when I see it, rising from the mud like something from a nightmare, 9 feet tall at least. At first, I think it's just another tree, but then it moves. It's covered in moss and vines, with flowers growing right out of its skin. The swamp ape, the creature I'd read about in old Florida legends but never believed in, until now. Claudia. The voice stops my heart. It sounds like it's coming through water, bubbling and gurgling, but I'd know that voice anywhere. Dad's voice. "You're not my father," I whisper, but my voice shakes. The creature moves closer. Every step it takes makes the plants around it dance, like they're on puppet strings. Trees bend out of its way, vines snap like whips. Even the air feels different, heavy with the smell of rotting plants. I try to run, but the thing just melts into the mud and appears right in front of me. When I hit it with my flashlight, its body falls apart like wet sand, only to reform seconds later. Everywhere it touches, new plants burst out of its skin. All of them the dangerous kinds, the ones with thorns and poison. Your father understood. It says, still using Dad's voice. He saw what we had to do. The creature waves its arm and the ground splits open. There, wrapped in tree roots like a museum display, is a skeleton. Dad's skeleton. I know it's him because his Park Service watch is still around one of the wrist bones. He made a choice, the thing says. The developers were coming. They would have drained the swamp, killed everything. Your father offered himself to save it. I feel sick, all these years searching, and now I know Dad didn't just disappear. He sacrificed himself. The swamp ape touches a nearby airboat engine, and I watch in horror as it rusts away to nothing in seconds. All around us, animals emerge from the shadows. Gators, snakes, birds. But they're wrong. Plants are growing. Out of them, through them, controlling them like puppets. The swamp needs a guardian, it says. Your father's time is done. Now it must be you. The ground under my feet turns to quicksand, pulling me down toward underwater caves made of twisted roots. The skeleton, Dad's skeleton, moves like a puppet on strings, reaching out to me with bony fingers. That's when I remember something. The abandoned drug runner's plane I passed earlier, it would have fuel. I reach into my bag, grab my emergency flare and run. The creature follows, controlling the whole swamp like its personal army. Vines try to grab me, mud tries to trap me. But I know these paths better than anyone except Dad. I reach the plane and find what I need, fuel. As the creature gets closer, I pour the gas in a circle and light it with the flare. The fire catches fast, too fast. But in the flames, I see something. Where the fire touches the swamp ape, the dried-out parts of its plant body start to crumble. It screams, not with Dad's voice anymore, but with a sound like tearing roots and breaking branches. It chases me through the burning sawgrass, but the flames are spreading. The creature keeps trying to regrow the grass around us, but I can see it getting weaker. I make it to my ranger station and grab the industrial plant killer we use to control invasive species. When the swamp ape bursts in, I empty the whole container on it. The chemical strips away its plant armor like paper burning, showing something dark and ancient underneath. With a roar that shakes the whole building, it backs away and falls into a sinkhole, dragging burning trees and vines down with it. The ground closes up like a mouth shutting, and everything goes quiet except for the crackling of the dying fires. I think I've won. I think it's over, but then I start coughing. Green spores float in the air around me, and I can feel them burning in my lungs. My skin feels strange, like bark growing over it. In the window's reflection, I see small leaves starting to sprout from my arms. The swamp ape's final revenge, or maybe, in its own twisted way, it's giving me what I wanted, a chance to be close to Dad again, to protect the swamp like he did. I write this now because people need to know the truth, need to understand what's out there in the deep parts of the Everglades. By the time you read this, I'll probably be gone, turned into something else, something that's part of the swamp forever. Just remember, if you're ever out in the Everglades and you hear whispers in the wind or see plants moving in ways they shouldn't, run. Run as fast as you can, because the swamp is always hungry, always watching, always waiting for its next guardian. 3 months have passed since that night in the swamp. The rangers found me the next morning, covered in strange green marks that no doctor could explain. I tried to tell them what happened, but who would believe me? They blamed the fires on lightning strikes and called my story the ravings of heat exhaustion. But my body is changing. Every morning I find new leaves growing from my skin. At first they were tiny, easy to hide under long sleeves. Now they're spreading faster, turning greener. My hair has started falling out, replaced by thin curling vines. When I cry, my tears are thick and sticky like tree sap. I've been writing everything down in Dad's old journal, adding my story to his. Someone needs to know the truth. Someone needs to understand what's really hiding in the Everglades. The other rangers avoid me now. They see how my skin is turning rough like bark, how my fingers are growing longer and more root-like. They pretend not to notice, but I catch them whispering. Last week I tried to visit Mom's grave to say goodbye, but when I got to the cemetery, all the flowers burst into bloom at once. The grass grew 6 inches in minutes, weaving itself around my feet like it was trying to hold me there. That's when I knew I couldn't stay in the normal world anymore. The swamp was calling me home. I drove to the park one last time, past the closed for investigation signs they put up after the fire. I walked deep into the swamp, to the place where Dad disappeared. The plants parted to let me through, like they recognized me as one of their own now. Birds fell silent as I passed. Even the alligators slid away, like they knew what I was becoming. My ranger uniform is hanging empty in my locker now, next to Dad's old hat. I won't need them anymore. The swamp is my uniform, my home, my everything. I can feel it in my bones, literally. They're turning soft and green, becoming part of the tangle of life that fills this place. They'll find this journal soon. Maybe. They'll understand. Maybe they won't. But I need you to know that I'm not afraid anymore. Dad didn't die that night during the hurricane. He became something else, something necessary. And now so have I. The locals say there's a new story spreading around the Everglades. They talk about a strange mangrove tree that wasn't there before, one that looks almost human. They say if you get too close, you can hear it whisper. Sometimes it warns people away from dangerous parts of the swamp. Other times, it tells them to protect this place, to keep it wild and free. And on quiet nights, when the moon is full and the air is thick with fog, some say they've seen 2 shadows moving through the trees. A father and daughter, some think, not quite human anymore, but still watching over the swamp they loved enough to give their lives for. So if you're ever deep in the Everglades and you hear a whisper in the wind or see a plant move in a way it shouldn't, don't be afraid. It might just be me or Dad doing our job, protecting this wild place from anyone who might harm it. We are the guardians now, my father and I, the swamp's own family. The following was found scrawled at the bottom of the last page, the handwriting becoming increasingly shaky and vine-like. I can feel the final change coming. My fingers can barely hold this pen anymore. The leaves are growing faster now, my skin hardening into bark, but I'm not scared. For the first time since Dad disappeared, I finally understand. Sometimes love means becoming part of something bigger than yourself. Sometimes it means letting go of who you were to protect what matters most. The sun is setting, and I can hear the swamp calling. It's time for me to go. Remember my story. Remember that there are places in this world still wild and strange and powerful, places worth protecting no matter the cost. And if you're ever in the Everglades, listen for our whispers in the wind. We'll be here, watching, waiting, protecting. Forever part of the wild heart of Florida, forever guardians of the swamp. Claudia Watson, last human park, ranger of the Southern Everglades. My name is Howard Miller. I'm 47 years old, and I used to be somebody that mattered. A professor with fancy degrees and students who looked up to me. Now I'm just the crazy guy who talks to rocks. It's been 3 years since I lost everything. My job at the university, my wife, my reputation, and worst of all, my daughter won't even take my calls anymore. All because I dared to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the mountains aren't as dead as we think they are. That's how I ended up here, in this tiny ranger cabin deep in the Adirondack Mountains. The other rangers stuck me in this remote outpost because they think I'm unstable. Maybe they're right, but the mountains, they know I'm right, and lately they've been trying to tell me something. It started with the leaves. Early autumn in the Adirondacks is usually beautiful, but this year the red maple leaves seemed blood red in a way I'd never seen before. When they fell into the mountain streams, they stained the water crimson, especially at sunset. Like the mountains were bleeding. I wrote it down in my leather journal, the same one that holds all my rejected research. I keep adding to it every day, filling pages with observations that no one would believe. Last Tuesday, I noticed the pine trees. Swaying though, there wasn't a breath of wind. Their needles rustled like they were whispering secrets to each other. I stood perfectly still and listened, but couldn't make out any words, just a rhythmic shushing that made the hair on my neck stand up. On Wednesday's patrol, I found something even stranger. Perfect circles on the forest floor where nothing grows. Not moss, not weeds, not even mushrooms, just bare dirt arranged in perfect concentric rings. I measured them carefully with my tape measure, then checked the same spots the next day. They had grown larger by exactly 2.75 inches. My ex-wife Janet would roll her eyes if she could see me now, on my hands and knees with a ruler, measuring bare patches of dirt. That's what she was doing the day I came home early and found her packing her bags, rolling her eyes and saying I needed help. That was right after I lost my job, right after I published my paper on living geology and became a laughingstock. I take my grandfather's antique theodolite, a surveyor's tool for measuring angles and elevations everywhere, even though the other rangers make jokes about it. The old ways are more honest. Yesterday, I found leaves arranged in strange patterns, not random like they should be after falling from trees. They formed shapes that looked almost like writing, but the boulders were the hardest to explain away. Massive rocks balanced on tiny points, defying gravity, others suspended between trees like they were caught mid-fall. Today, I noticed water in Blackpaw Creek flowing uphill. Not obviously, you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. But my theodolite doesn't lie. I followed the creek and witnessed a small rock slide that made no sense. The stones fell slowly, almost floating down the mountainside, and they made no sound, not even a whisper as they settled. As I hiked back, I noticed all the deer trails, curved sharply away from the north face of Whispering Pine Mountain. Even though going straight would be easier, every animal path bent away like something was pushing them aside. My instruments showed the elevation of the ground where I was standing had changed since yesterday, down by 3.2 feet. But that's impossible. Took another swig from my flask and looked out my cabin window at the mountain looming above me. As the sun set behind it, I swear its shadow stretched toward my cabin like a hand reaching out. Something is happening in these mountains, something nobody would believe. I didn't sleep well last night. The cabin kept making noises, not the usual creaks an old wooden building makes, but something that sounded almost like words. Tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 tap. It wasn't. Until morning, that I realized it might have been Morse code. My grandfather taught me Morse when I was a kid. I grabbed a pencil with shaky hands and wrote out what I remembered of the pattern, FEEDINGTIME, after 2 cups of strong coffee. I headed out for my daily patrol. The morning was cold, my breath making little clouds in front of my face. The survey markers were wrong. Every half mile along the main trails, we have metal markers drilled into the bedrock. The marker at Blue Jay Point was off by 3 inches. Not just the surface plate, the whole metal rod that goes deep into solid rock had moved. That's impossible. Those markers are set in bedrock. They don't move unless there's an earthquake. I set up my theodolite to measure the angle of the mountain peak. According to my calculations from last week, it should be exactly 43.2 degrees from my position. Today, it measured 44.7 degrees. Mountains don't change shape. That's what everyone says. That's what got me fired. As I approached Osprey Ridge, I noticed how quiet it was. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Even the insects were silent, just the sound of my boots on the path and my own breathing. About halfway up, I found a backpack wedged between 2 rocks. It was dusty and weathered, like it had been there for weeks. Inside was a water bottle, some granola bars, a map, and a camera. My hands trembled as I turned on the camera. The battery was almost dead, but it had enough power to show me the last few photos taken. Most were typical tourist shots: trees, a stream, a selfie of a smiling young man. The last photo made my blood run cold. It was just a picture of the mountain face, plain grey rock with a few scrubby bushes growing in the cracks. But when I looked closer, I could see something in the stone, a massive shape, like an eye, not carved, but formed in the natural patterns of the rock. And it seemed to be looking right at the camera, right at me. On my way back, I witnessed something I still can't explain. A small rock slide started above the trail ahead of me. The rocks and dirt didn't just tumble down randomly. They moved together like a wave chasing a hiker who had wandered off the marked trail. The man ran, screaming as the slide followed him. It sped up when he did, slowed when he stumbled. Just as it seemed about to overtake him, the man crossed back onto the official trail, and the rock slide stopped, dead still, right at the trail marker, like it knew where the boundary was. That night the dreams were worse. In them I was climbing Whispering Pine Mountain, but the stone was soft and warm under my hands. Each time I pulled myself up, I could feel the mountain pulse beneath me, like a giant heart beating. I woke up in a cold sweat around dawn. Outside my window I saw a flock of birds flying near the mountain. Suddenly, 3 of them seemed to hit an invisible wall mid-air. They dropped straight down, necks broken. I opened my journal to write down what I'd seen. That's when I found pages I didn't remember writing. 10 pages of my own handwriting, but I had no memory of writing any of it. The words made little sense. Calculations, diagrams, and phrases like "the mountain hungers" and "moving stone, living rock" repeated over and over. I set up an old seismograph near the mountain base. After 3 hours, the machine started recording. Not random vibrations or the usual small tremors. These were regular, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I traced the source to a specific cliff face on the north side of the mountain, the same area where hikers felt watched. As I stood there listening to the mountain's pulse, I noticed a circular area where all the plants seemed to be dying. Not just dying, aging and withering before my eyes. Fresh green leaves curled, browned, and fell off in minutes. When I got back to my cabin, I discovered a raised scar running down my back. Using 2 mirrors, I saw it match the ridgeline of Whispering Pine Mountain perfectly. The next morning, I called the ranger office about the backpack I found. 3 hikers had gone missing on Whispering Pine Mountain in the past month, all near the north face, just like the Wilson girl last year, said Tom, the head ranger. Remember her? College. Student hiking alone. Never found a trace. I hung up slowly. Emily Wilson. She'd been all over the local papers when she disappeared. A 20-year-old from Albany, studying biology. She went missing exactly 1 week after my paper was published. 1 week after I announced to the world that mountains might be alive. Later, I encountered 2 hikers heading toward the dangerous north face. "You shouldn't be here," I warned them. "This area isn't safe." The girl frowned. "But it's not marked as closed. We checked at the ranger station." "The ranger station doesn't know." "What's going on up here?" I said. "There have been rock slides, dangerous ones. 3 people missing this month alone." They continued anyway. I followed at a distance, and when they took the trail leading to the north face, I caught up and lied about a trail closure. They reluctantly took another path. As I stood alone, I felt it again, that sense of being watched. I took out my camera and examined the cliff face, finding a crack that hadn't been there before. A long, curved line that reminded me of a mouth. Then I heard a scream from further up the mountain. I ran toward it and found the male hiker alone, white with shock, staring at the cliff face. "Where's your girlfriend?" I gasped. He just pointed at the rock wall. "The rock, it opened," he whispered, "like a mouth. She was standing right there and it just swallowed her." The ground beneath us shuddered. The stone face in front of us shifted slightly, bulging outward in one spot, then settling back. The man screamed and ran. I stayed, staring at the rock face. "Let her go," I said softly. "Please." Silence. Then another rumble, deeper this time. When I looked up, there was no sign of the missing woman, only her small digital watch on the ground, its face cracked, time stopped at 11:42 a.m. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin creaked, like it was speaking. I started writing everything down, everything I'd seen, everything I suspected. My hand moved almost on its own, drawing diagrams of the mountain's internal structure, mapping what seemed to be a digestive system made of caves and tunnels. When dawn came, I had filled 12 pages. My hand was cramped and my eyes burned, but I felt clearer somehow. The Adirondack Mountains weren't just alive, they were hungry. Tom visited my cabin later, his face grim. "We found the guy," he said. "The hiker you reported. Complete mental breakdown. Keeps talking about the mountain eating his girlfriend." "Did they find her?" I asked. "No sign of her. Search team's been out since yesterday afternoon. Thing is, Howard, he mentioned you. Said you warned them. Said you knew what was happening up there. I told them there had been rock slides. That's all." Tom's eyes narrowed. "He says you've been talking to the mountain, that you understand it somehow." He looked past me into my cabin, with its walls covered in maps and photos. "You need help, Howard," he said quietly. "This obsession with living mountains cost you your job, your marriage. And now," he trailed off. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said finally. "Stay away from the north face. That's an order." I waited until dark, then packed my backpack. Flashlight, camera, my journal, water, rope, and my grandfather's theodolite. I headed straight for the north face, ignoring Tom's order to stay away. The forest was too quiet as I hiked. No owls hooting, no creatures rustling in the underbrush. My flashlight beam bounced off trees and rocks, creating dancing shadows. I set up a small camp facing the cliff. If something was going to happen, I wanted to see it. Hours passed. Around 3 a.m., I dozed off despite my best efforts. I woke with a start. The air felt heavier, charged like before a lightning storm. A low rumble grew louder, like stones grinding together far below the earth. I fumbled for my flashlight and shone it at the cliff face. The rock was moving, not sliding or grumbling but rippling, like muscles shifting under skin. The flat cliff face began to bulge outward in the center, stretching and reshaping itself. A crack appeared in the rock, a long, curved line that widened slowly, revealing darkness behind. Above the widening crack, the stone shifted again, forming a bulge that split into a massive eye, a giant eye made of living stone, its pupil a deep black pit. The eye focused on me. The mouth crack widened further, revealing jagged stone formations like teeth, and then it spoke. The sound was like boulders grinding together, vibrations I felt in my bones more than heard with my ears. "Professor," it rumbled. "At last!" This word echoed inside my skull, making my teeth ache. "You see me," the mountain said. "Others look. Only you see. What are you?" I whispered. The massive eye blinked slowly, stone eyelids grinding shut, then open. Old, patient, hungry. "You eat people?" I managed to ask. "Eat stone, eat tree, eat flesh, all return to earth. The missing hikers, the Wilson girl. You took them. Took, tasted, learned. Humans carry knowledge in blood, in brain. I taste, I know. You've been studying us? Learning from what you eat?" "Yes, learned much from you, Professor. Your research, your words. In many minds I tasted, but best from her." "Her? Who?" The mountain's mouth widened. From the black depths, something rolled forward. A small backpack, faded blue with a University of Albany patch. My hands shook as I picked it up. I knew this backpack. I'd bought it myself 4 years ago. A gift for my daughter. Emily, I whispered. She knew you were right, the mountain said. She came to prove it, to help you. Emily hadn't changed her name because she was ashamed of me. She'd disappeared, been taken by this creature that had somehow learned about itself from my research. You gave me words, names, ideas. Through those who read your work, through her. I clutched the backpack to my chest. Give her back, I begged. Cannot, consumed. Part of me now, as you will be. The ground suddenly tilted beneath me. I scrambled behind a boulder as my equipment slid toward the waiting mouth. You cannot hide. Professor, I am the mountain. I am everywhere. The boulder I was hiding behind shifted, rolling slightly away from me, exposing me to that massive eye. I sprinted down the trail. Behind me I heard a terrible sound, rock scraping against rock, a mountainside on the move. The trail itself seemed to fight me. Roots appeared where there had been none, tripping me. The ground buckled, making me stumble, but I kept running, Emily's backpack clutched to my chest. I didn't stop until I reached my cabin, slamming the door behind me. Then I noticed the stones I kept under my pillow, my collection of rock samples, arranged in a perfect circle on my desk. A circle I hadn't made. As I watched, one stone rolled slightly, adjusting its position. The circle was forming a pattern, an eye. The mountain creature could control any stone, anywhere. I grabbed my journal and Emily's backpack and ran outside to my truck. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, whispering pine mountains. Shadows seemed to be reaching for my cabin, stretching impossibly long in the moonlight. The road curved around the mountain base. Ahead, a wall of fallen rock blocked the entire path. I slammed on the brakes, then threw the truck into reverse, only to find another pile of rocks had formed behind me. I was trapped. The truck's radio turned on by itself, static hissing from the speakers. Through the white noise, I heard that grinding, inhuman voice. Professor, we have much to discuss. The stones in the rock slide ahead began reshaping, forming a crude face in the pile of rubble. You gave me knowledge. Now I give. You gift. A sharp pain shot up my spine, the same spot where that strange scar had formed. Through tear-blurred eyes, I saw small stones rolling toward me from all directions, gathering around my body. This ancient stone hunter, what I'd call a slide rock bolter in my notes, wanted to add me to its collection, to make me part of it, like Emily. As the stones began to crawl up my legs, I knew I had to fight back. I kicked free and scrambled back into the truck. Pebbles were finding their way through vents and cracks in the old vehicle. I remembered the abandoned quarry nearby. They'd used dynamite there years ago. Dynamite might be enough to hurt this thing. I rammed through the rock barrier and drove to the quarry. In the storage shed, I found 6 sticks of dynamite and fuse wire, old but still usable. The creature knew what I was planning. The ground trembled and cracked beneath my tires as I drove back toward the north face. The pain in my spine was almost blinding. I could feel something growing there, tiny stones embedded under my skin, following the line of my spine. The creature was trying to take me over. I was running out of time. When I reached the north face, the cliff was shifting again, the eye and mouth forming in the living rock. But now the formation looked more human, mimicking features it had absorbed. Maybe even Emily's. Let me show you something, Professor, the creature said, its voice more human-like now. Let me show you those who came before. Faces emerged from the stone, human faces pressed against the rock as if trapped, and there in the center, Emily, my daughter's face, formed in living stone, her eyes closed as if sleeping. They're all here, part of me now. You can join them, join her. You're a monster, I whispered. I am survival, older than your species. I watched dinosaurs die, watched ice ages come and go. I fed, I learned, I evolved. The stones in my spine pulsed with pain. I forced myself to stand and pulled out the dynamite. 6 sticks, not much against a mountain, but perhaps enough to hurt this thing. As I unwound the fuse wire, the ground beneath me suddenly tilted toward that waiting mouth. My grandfather's theodolite, which had fallen into the creature earlier, came tumbling back out. Seeing it gave me an idea. "Wait," I called out. "I have something better than explosives, something you want." The tilting ground stabilized. The giant eye focused on me. "Measurements," I said. "Precise measurements of your own structure. Data you can't get any other way. My life's work." "Show me," the creature demanded. I stepped closer, holding the theodolite in one hand and my backpack in the other. "I need to take new measurements right here at the center of your consciousness." When I was close enough, I pretended to adjust the theodolite while secretly preparing the dynamite and lighting the fuse. What I've discovered is that living stone has a natural resonance frequency, a specific vibration that can either strengthen or disrupt its structure. The massive eye dilated, fixed on me and the theodolite. When the fuse was burning, I hurled the bundle of dynamite directly into the center of the giant eye and ran. The explosion knocked me flat. When I looked back, where the eye had been was now a smoking crater. The cliff face was cracked and split, long fissures spreading outward. The ground began to shake violently. Massive chunks of the cliff broke free and crashed down. The very shape of the mountain seemed to be changing, folding in on itself in places, bulging outward in others. I drove away as the mountain continued to convulse behind me. At the ranger station, Tom and 2 other rangers were staring up at the mountain. "What the hell is happening up there?" Tom asked. "Earthquake. Rock slide," I said simply. "Bad one. North face is collapsing." 6 months later, I'm living in a small apartment in town. My findings about the slide rock bolter were rejected by scientific journals. My reputation is worse than ever, but I don't care what they think. I only care about warning people, keeping them away from that mountain while the creature heals, because it is healing. I can feel it. The pain in my spine comes and goes. Some mornings I find small stones arranged in patterns on my nightstand. Stones I don't remember collecting. In my dreams, I hear Emily's voice calling from far away, telling me that she's waiting, that the mountain misses me. Last week I found a tiny stone growth on my spine, right where the scar is. Hard and pointed, like the beginning of a mountain peak. I understand now why no one believed my research. Some truths are too big, too strange for people to accept. The mountain is quiet these days. Hikers have returned to the trails, though they avoid the north face. Everyone thinks the danger has passed, but I know better. I feel it in my bones. The slide rock bolter is just waiting, healing, growing stronger, and somehow I'm part of it now. Its offspring using me as a host, slowly changing me from the inside out. I think about Emily, her face in the living stone. I think about all I could learn if I just let it happen. If I joined her, I think I can feel the mountain's thoughts sometimes filtering through the growth on my spine. Ancient, patient thoughts. So if you're ever hiking in the Adirondacks and you pass by Whispering Pine Mountain, don't linger. Don't listen to the whispers in the trees or investigate boulders balanced in impossible ways. And if you see an old man with a bent back, carrying an antique theodolite and muttering to himself about living mountains, run, because I can't stop what's happening to me, can't fight what I'm becoming, and the mountain is always hungry for more.